I'm more connected to the energy of my future than I am to the energy of my past. I'm believing in my future more than I'm believing in my past.
And a new personality is connected to a new personal reality. So the next question is, does that change the body?
Once the energy's moved, you're gonna feel pretty blessed in that moment. In fact,
so we can transfer guilt, shame, insecurities into bliss? There is so much potential waiting for you if you are able to unlock your mind and your body at the same time. And this is why in this video we bring Joe Dispenza to share some of the greatest lessons on how to do just that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to click the like button, subscribe to this channel, and let me know your biggest takeaway in the comments below.
if you wanted a true relationship where it was fundamentally based on this concept called love. Now let's talk about that, because we practice this a lot in the work that we do. If you could truly begin to practice trading those survival emotions every day for elevated emotions, and you practiced opening your heart, it's a skill that has to take place where you move out of survival. So people say to me, well, I can't open my heart, I can't feel love. And I say, well, what do you practice feeling? Because whatever you practice feeling, you're feeling most of the time. And that feeling could be guilt, but you're so used to it, you wouldn't even know it's guilt. It just feels like you.
Are most people practicing a feeling, or are they just reacting to how they feel?
Well, they're reacting to their external environment.
What's happening?
Or they're reacting to some stray thought in their mind, and every thought produces a chemical. So if they have an unhappy thought, they feel unhappy. If they have a judgmental thought, it produces chemicals that makes you feel polarized, right? So,
how much does one thought change your chemical body?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So let's just we'll put this on hold
okay,
here.
Yes.
So the stronger the emotions that we feel from the problems and conditions in our life, the more altered we feel inside of us, the more we pay attention to what's causing it outside of us. So if you have an event in your life, an experience in your life that has a strong emotional charge to it, and you don't feel like your normal self, you feel this alarm system switch on. You're going to narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain's going to take a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory, right? So then what people don't know is that every time they think about that event, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event was occurring. And
that moment.
In that moment. So the highly charged event is actually producing the emotion, and the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real experience that's creating the emotion and the emotion that the person is fabricating by thought alone. The body's believing. It's so objective, it's believing it's in the same environmental experience. So the highly charged emotional events, some people think of their ex, and the thought of that person
makes them sick.
Makes them feel out of balance. Wow. So,
and one image, one thought in their mind makes them feel out of balance.
So all you need is an image and an emotion, a thought and a feeling, a stimulus and a response, and you're conditioning your body emotionally into the past. So now, the memories, and this is just not in the brain now, it's in the body, okay? So now, that thought of that person is actually creating a response in the body that's consuming the body's energy for growth and repair, consuming the body's energy to create, because in survival, it's not a time to create. In survival, it's time to run, fight, and hide. So the problem is that it becomes a subconscious program. It's no longer a conscious process. It now is a subconscious process. So now the body has been conditioned into resentment, into unhappiness, into fear, anxiety, whatever it is. And so back to our concept of bringing love into your life. So you say to that person, okay, you open your heart, and they're going to say, are you kidding me? I was injured. Yeah. I was hurt. I'm not going to do that. Let me see your cards first, right? And once I see your cards, then I'll open up a little bit. So we protect this, right? So now in that state of survival, the research shows that the long-term effects of those stress hormones are pushing the genetic buttons that are creating disease. The body can't live in emergency mode for that period of time. So in a sense, the person is making themselves sick by thought alone. Their thoughts are making them sick, literally. So the problem is now the body is conditioned into the past, and it's the mind. Now once the body
is the mind?
The body becomes the mind emotionally. So now all of this energy is stored in the body, and now the person now has to leave their unhappiness and step out into the unknown. They have to get out of the familiar feelings that has defined them. So they'll say, I can't really feel joy. I can't really feel love. And what they're really saying is, I've been conditioning my body emotionally so much into the past that I can't feel anything else other than what I know.
Anger, resentment, pain, suffering.
Psychology calls those normal human states of consciousness. Those are altered states of consciousness.
So normal states of consciousness are these kind of negative feelings?
No, I'm saying that those states of survival, people say anger, fear, those are normal things.
Gotcha.
No, those are in survival. Those are altered states. The survival chemicals are actually knocking your brain and body out of balance. You're out of balance in that moment. Mm-hmm. And if you keep doing that, the imbalance is now the new balance. And now you're altered emotionally. So back to the concept of love. Mm-hmm. So the person can theoretically, intellectually, philosophically say, oh, I want this type of person, she's got to be this way, he's got to look this way, he's got to be like this. And they're basically saying, I want something that represents all the things that I no longer want, right? And so they're creating with their brain and mind, which is perfect. The problem is that if you can't feel the emotion of your future, your manifestation of love before it's made manifest. Like people say, well, when my relationship happens, when I find Mr. Right, then I'm going to feel love. Like, waiting for the outer environment to change, to take away this feeling of anger, resentment, emptiness. But they forgot that they create reality. In other words, when it finally appears that I'm going to feel love, that's cause and effect. We're waiting for something to happen. If you're feeling the lack and the emptiness, then you're keeping your relationship at arm's length because you don't have the magnetic field to draw to you. So the emotions that come from these energy centers, the lower energy centers in our body, do have frequencies, there's chemistry involved, but they have a different agenda. So now we ask the person, can you teach your body emotionally what the future will feel like before it's made manifest? That means you can't wait for your relationship to feel love. You have to reverse that battleship and understand feeling love now is going to be the magnet. And if you can hold the vision of your future, a clear intention, with a coherent brain, organize signals into the field, and you could actually crack this thing open and practice getting so present in the moment that you're not anticipating the next moment or trying to predict the future. And you're no longer romancing the emotions of your past. You can find that sweet spot of the generous present moment. The familiar past is the known emotionally. The predictable future is the habituation of autopilot, being unconscious, and programs. Those are both knowns. There's only one place where the unknown exists. That's the present moment. So if you could work with your body to the point that it trusts you enough to feel so safe that you have conquered it in a certain way that it could actually relax into the present moment, and it's not worried about what's going to happen next or what's going on around you, or that you need to eat, you need to pee, you need to move. Right. You got beyond all your drives and you're ready to create. That moment where you're present, if you could begin to work with your heart and start to breathe and start to practice feeling love. In the beginning, it would feel foolish or gratitude. Why would I feel love if it hasn't happened? Well, that's because you've been hypnotized into waiting for your world to change to feel the emotion from the experience. Wow. But according to the quantum model, your emotion ahead of the experience, when you combine that clear intention with the elevated emotion, and you feel love, your body's so objective that it's actually believing, it's living in that future in the present moment. And your body now is beginning to change. You are beginning to change your biology to reflect what you're about to experience in your future. So the stronger the love you feel, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you're going to pay attention to that picture in your mind. Stimulus, response, memory, emotion, thought, and feeling. But now you're remembering your future instead of remembering your past. And biologically, it's actually the same.
How do we, remembering your future as opposed to remembering your past?
Right, it's the same thing biologically.
The body experiences it the same way by thinking and imagining something that hasn't happened yet, but it will happen.
Okay, well,
and imagining something vividly from the past that happened. Sometimes our brains trick ourselves in thinking it happened a different way, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that's incidental. It's none of your business how it happened. In fact,
it's how we interpret it.
Exactly. It's your perception, right? So, so then the stronger the emotion you feel from some outer experience in your life, the more altered you feel, the more the brain freezes the frame and takes a snapshot. Well, now you're freezing a frame in the outer environment. But if you're truly in the present moment and you know exactly what you want, and you begin to teach your body emotion, start practicing opening that heart. It's amazing what happens. The moment that heart begins to open, we've measured this so many times, Lewis, on a scan, on a real-time brain scan. When the heart moves into this kind of rhythm, when you're feeling frustration, when you're feeling impatient, when you're feeling resentment, you are stepping on the gas pedal and you're stepping on the brake at the same time, and the heart is pumping against a closed system, and it causes an erratic beat. It becomes incoherent. And energy literally leaves the heart. Now, you no longer believe in your future. You can't put your heart into your future. You can't trust the outcome because there's no energy there. It's being used and consumed somewhere else, so energy is leaving the brain as well. But once energy starts to move into the heart, we've seen this so many times, and it starts to beat in this rhythm, like banging a drum or dropping a pebble in water, pebble after pebble. The heart begins to create a wave of energy right to the brain, like taking a big sheet and going like that. And then all of a sudden you see this wave, and the brain gets this rush of energy, and that change in brain wave patterns, that change, that wave is carrying information. And the person starts to get a very clear idea. They see their future very clearly. Now that energy is causing them to move into very coherent alpha brainwave patterns, which is the state of creation. This is when you no longer hear the voice in your head that's talking to you, that you listen to and believe is the truth.
I'm not good enough.
Yeah, whatever that is.
That's
called the default mode. It suppresses the default mode network, and the next thing you know, you start seeing in pictures and images. You start dreaming. And that's the imagination, that's the creative state. So now, you start naturally imagining the heart is the creative center. We gotta put our heart into our future, it better be open and activated. So now, when you start falling in love with your future, oxytocin is released in the brain and in the heart. Oxytocin signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals another chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor. And just like when your sexual organs get filled with blood because you're aroused, the same thing happens here as it would happen somewhere else. And literally the arteries in the heart and lungs engorge. And now your heart feels full and it's thumping in order, and you're in the present moment. Now, once that happens, and it's beating in rhythm, the heart produces an external magnetic field up to 3 meters wide. Now, you're in survival, you're drawing from the field and turning into chemistry. When you get energy in the heart, it's causing a change in the brain, and all of a sudden it's resetting the baseline for trauma, and now here you have a magnetic field. Now the heart is your magnet. It is the center of creation. And now that energy is frequency. And frequency carries information, and you can lay the thought of your new relationship on that energy because it's consistent with it. You cannot lay the thought of your new relationship in need. That's a different energy.
What do you mean in need?
Well, if you're feeling...
I'm needing someone to love me,
yeah, of course, that's a different frequency. That's a different energy.
What happens when you're in a need state as opposed to an attraction state?
Well, you're in lack. So now you're trying, you're grasping, you're controlling, you're forcing, you're trying to predict, you're overthinking, overanalyzing, and that's how people live their relationships. So then if you are going to prepare your brain and body for a new relationship, then you would have to become love completely every day. And that signal then that you're sending out into the field can carry the thought of your health, your wealth, your relationship, or whatever. But here's the cool part. When the heart is activated like that, and you feel so whole, so in love with life, so satisfied in the moment, so exuberant, that it's impossible to want. Now you're no longer in lack. Now you're so whole that you will magnetize wholeness in your life. The person who's the person that fits the mold energetically, that would be the same as you and yet complement you, so that the two can become one, right? And then, instead of in contrast, in union, you exchange information equal to that emotional state. In other words, people use each other to reaffirm their dependence on certain emotions. You have certain people you complain with about politics or whatever. They complain back about their lives, and you use each other to reaffirm, you know, some type of
belief or something.
Belief about life. Emotionally, you have emotional agreements on things. Well, that emotion is energy, and energy is frequency, and frequency carries information. So you share the same energy, you share the same information, but that's what people do in their lives. But now, in a true loving relationship, when you're truly in your heart, then the question is, what would love do in the relationship? And when your heart is open, it's no longer about you. Yeah. It's about how I feel so amazing with you. I feel even more amazing, but without you, I'm still whole. And so now I'm no longer in need or lack. And so now, when we get together and our fields interfere, when they start interfering, now the amplitude gets way higher, and there's way more energy. And now, I mean, I'm all about all 7 centers of the body lining up, all of them. And we're here in a body, let's enjoy it all, but come from love. And so now your heart is so open that you can't do anything else but give. You feel so amazing. You're so happy with yourself, so happy with your life, so happy with what you have. You want other people to feel the same way. And you say, here, take that. And when you give now, guess what happens? You release more oxytocin, more nitric oxide, and more of those chemicals that cause the heart to swell even more. Then all of a sudden, your immune system gets stronger, and all of a sudden your body starts feeling better, you start having more energy, and now the constructive interference between two people that are coming together in wholeness and no longer dependence or lack or separation or need is a different game. So then what they do to protect, to nurture, to grow, to evolve that love is one of the most important things that they have. Not because they're doing it out of obligation or because they're married or whatever. It's just they can't not do it. And we see people, had somebody scan the other day in our workshop in profoundly high amounts of gamma. She can do it on command. And there's an incredible arousal that takes place that goes along with these high brain frequencies that you can only describe as ecstasy or bliss. Now, you're getting that ecstasy and bliss not from anyone or anything out there. No drug, no person, no football game, no shopping spree is doing that. It's somehow inside. It's coming from within. Like, what is that connection that you have? And so one of the scientists said to this woman, how do you do that? You know what she said? I have difficulty not doing it. I can't not do it when I'm in a it's too when I'm doing this, it's too good. So now that could be a constant feeling in your life. So now
what, love?
Independent of anyone or anything, it's coming from within you. Okay? So think about this.
Whether you're in a relationship or single.
Doesn't matter, you're whole. Your love is not wavering, it's constant, right? So now imagine having this feeling. And when oxytocin is released, what most people don't know is that it seeps into the amygdala. And there's certain survival emotions in the amygdala: fear and anxiety, aggression and anger, pain and suffering. And it literally shuts the lights out in those circuits in the amygdala. And there's only one thing left: love and joy, right? So now this person is suppressing the survival centers, resetting the baseline of the past, how they perceive the past. And now the research on oxytocin shows that when you have just a slight level of increase, and our research shows our students are way outside of normal, that it's impossible to hold a grudge. You know why? Because the feeling feels so good. Why would you judge another person, or why would you react to some condition and lose that feeling? You figure it out really fast. So this birth of unconditional love really says, I'm in love with myself, my connection to some divine intelligence within me. And because I'm so in love with life and with myself, I'm looking at life through the lens of love, which means I'm going to allow you to be whoever you want around me. I don't really, I'm no longer...
I'm not a reaction.
I'm not a reaction because I've overcome my fear, I've overcome my anger, and now I'm ready for love. And now that relationship that you have, if you find that equal, that's a needle in the haystack, because now it's a vibrational match.
Right.
And so as long as you're evolving, as long as I'm evolving, as long as we're sharing the same ideals, as long as we're working together, as long as we have our independence, and as long as we come together and we bring our best, and I say to you, how was your day? I mean, what did you learn? Or let's start our day. So how are you going to be today? Come on, let's just support each other. So what are the programs you're going to stay away from? Are you going to rush? You know, what did you do yesterday that you want to improve today? How can I support you? How can I love you in that? You want to text at noon? What do you need? And then, how am I going to be? Okay, tell me how you vocalize it, articulate it, so that now I understand your intention and I can support. That's good. And so then, when the person can articulate it, what are they doing? They're rehearsing in their mind who they're going to be, and so now they're becoming conscious of that future. And then they have to work on staying conscious of their unconscious programs, and by articulating that, they're going to not let those thoughts slip by as well. So then, now you have two people in evolution. It's no longer about all the other things. It's not about the money. It's not about the sex. It's not about the weight. It's not about the diet. Those are all things that we already know. This is something else. This is a whole nother level where when you exchange and evolve on this level, it's the most important thing, because now you see that person as a mirror. Oh my God, she did amazing. I'm in love with her. I admire her. Wow, she's got it going on. She executed today. She got her behaviors to match her intentions, and I want to celebrate her. Like wow, I'm in awe. That to me, you don't work on that. You work on you. Everybody works on themselves, and then they bring their best. And if they're not at their best, excuse yourself and get back to your best. And if you tell me it's that person or that circumstance, we went back to the unconscious program of being a victim. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with reacting. But the next question is, how long?
I'm going to stay in this mode.
Right. Or do you want help getting out?
Right.
Yeah, right? So I think that when you start feeling those elevated emotions and your energy is synchronized, right? And you got a Wi-Fi signal.
Right.
You got a signal.
You're connected. You're 5G. You're connected.
And you're connected. And what are you connected in? In this sense of wholeness, this sense of love, this sense of joy, this satisfaction with yourself and your life. And when I watch this, Louis. I mean, people come to our events for all kinds of reasons. Some people come for health. Some people come for wealth. Some people come for relationships. It's really funny, and they show up. Angry people. They're angry with themselves. When they're angry with themselves, they'll be impatient and angry with others. People who are unhappy with themselves will punish other people so that they can feel their unhappiness.
Or is it to get their anger out, or is it why?
No, because that's who they are. That's the emotion that's driving their behaviors. People who are in love with themselves will find love in others. People who are happy with themselves will find something that they can connect with. They won't see all the flaws. They'll see some part of them that they want to enjoy. I mean, so if you're in a relationship and you've scrubbed the cupboard and you've taken out all those skeletons and you've looked at them and you said, I don't want to bring this into my relationship. I don't want my insecurity to be there. I don't want my fear to be there. I don't want my judgment to be there. I don't want my emotions from other relationships to be there. So let me finish this. In other words, if you want love in your life, in your future, then you better take care of your frustration, because you can't bring that there. You got to leave it. So then, well, you may say to me, well, it's because that person and this emotion from 15 years ago, my ex, makes me feel frustrated. Well, let me tell you something. The only reason that you're thinking about your ex is because you're still in frustration. You overcome frustration. You'll look back at your ex and you'll be like, I wish them well.
Yeah.
I'm not connected to my past any longer. So cleaning the cupboards and getting down to those thoughts that slip by people's awareness all the time, their behaviors, how they complain, they make excuses, they say it'll never happen. What do? And the emotions that keep them connected to their past, they won't even see that person. That they'll walk right past their future relationship. They'll never recognize that person because they're looking at their future through the neurology and the chemistry of their past.
Wow.
And the brain only learns we only see reality based on pattern recognition. I memorize your face, now I know Lewis. And if the pattern matches, I know. But if you're creating a future, and you're not clear on that future, and you want all these things, but you haven't addressed all those circuits and behaviors and emotions and chemicals of the past, you won't recognize the pattern. You'll walk right past the relationship. You'll never see it. So I think that there's the preparation for the relationship, the overcoming, and overcoming and overcoming and overcoming and overcoming and becoming. All of a sudden now says, I am worthy. And the universe only gives us what we think we're worthy of receiving. So when you're worthy to receive, it's not going to be on Match.com when you're looking at body parts and whatever else. This is going to be like, ka-ching.
An energy connection.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, that came out of nowhere. Because when you're in survival, and you're in separation, and you're in lack, and you're forcing and controlling and trying to predict outcomes, you're matter trying to change matter. And of course, it's going to take time for this to happen because you're creating a three-dimensional reality. And everything in three-dimensional reality takes time. But when you're creating from the heart, with a coherent brain and a coherent heart, and you got that 5G Wi-Fi signal, it's not like you go anywhere now. The experiences are coming to, you're drawing the event to you. So we spend a lot of time bonding with our future emotionally. I have colleagues of mine who look at our data on oxytocin and they're like, listen, oxytocin levels go up during, in a relationship, the honeymoon stage of a relationship, and monogamy is created because of those chemicals, or a female mammal is bonding with her offspring. That's exactly right. I want our people, our students, to bond and fall in love with their future just like they do with somebody else. And when you're bonded to your future, no person, no circumstance, no thing is going to remove you from it. So then, if you fall from grace during the day, then the next question is, what person, what circumstance caused me to disconnect from my love in the future? And let me rehearse in my mind, if I have that same circumstance, how I'm going to overcome it. And now you're worthy of love. It's no longer the person or the event. It's just you're doing what it takes to stay in the emotion of your future. Your body is aligned emotionally to that future. So great doing it with a meditation. That's easy. But now the real game is open your eyes. Open your eyes.
It's happening.
Open your eyes and be in the initiation of life and stay in that place and just know that your future is going to happen. So being able to activate the heart and breathe in there and get the body out of survival and start working with it like it feels safe enough to create. Once energy makes it here, you're going to get some really good ideas. You're going to see things you never thought of seeing. You're going to feel things you never thought you'd feel. And the images that you're creating, what are they doing? The thoughts that you're creating, they're making more of those chemicals. And now you're feeling more of the feeling of your future before it happens. You're giving your body a sampling, a taste of the future before it's happened. Keep doing that enough times, and that feeling is going to become very familiar to you.
Now, you've been working with teaching people how to heal themselves with their minds, right? Overcome disease, overcome any type of chronic illness or pain through the mind, the principle of the mind. I grew up in a religion called Christian Science that did not use medicine. I didn't get vaccinations when I was a kid. My dad wouldn't let me go to the hospital. He wanted to use thought, prayer, the mindset to overcome any pain or any physical ailment. And so this is something that I was learning in a different way as an early kid. When did you start to learn about this philosophy or principle or truth and start applying it to your life?
Well, I got run over by a truck in a triathlon in 1986 on the biking portion of the race. I broke 6 vertebrae in my spine, and I was told that I'd never walk again. And so the typical surgical procedure for multiple compression fractures with cord impingement is this surgery called Harrington rod surgery. And in my case, they were going to cut off the backs of parts of my vertebrae from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. And then they screw in these long stainless steel rods, and when you screw those rods into the vertebrae, it acts like a cantilever. It lifts the spinal column off the cord. But the prognosis was I probably wouldn't walk again, and that the surgery was hopeful that it would give me some relief. And I think if it was any other patient, Lewis, besides me, I probably would have recommended the surgery, but this was me, you know.
Sure.
And I just couldn't rush into it. So I had 4 opinions, you know, from 4 of the leading surgeons in Southern California, and they were adamant that I needed this surgery.
All 4 of them?
All 4 of them. Yeah, in fact, the medical director of Scripps Hospital at the time was my surgeon. And he thought I had a head injury, or he thought, you know, that I had PTSD, that I wasn't just following his instruction. Anyway, I decided against the surgery, and I thought, well, listen, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm basically laying face down. And I thought, well, there's an intelligence that's giving us life, that's keeping our heart beating and digesting our food. It really knows how to heal way better than me. And this innate intelligence is what's giving us life. And I thought, well, if it's an intelligence, it's a consciousness. And consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention. So it must be paying attention to me. So I said, look, maybe I'll just spend the rest of my time trying to connect to this intelligence and give it a plan, give it a design, give it a template. And when I was really present and complete with that design, I would surrender this creation to this greater mind and allow it to do the healing for me. And the other thing I said is I'm not going to let any thought slip by my awareness that I don't want to experience. Now that sounds really easy, right? But when you're faced with crisis or trauma, we tend to focus on what we don't want to have happen instead of what we do want to have happen. So I started on this journey. I decided against the surgery, and it was a big revolution at the time. And I went through 6.5 weeks of hell. I just could not get my mind to do what I wanted it to do, because I'd start reconstructing my vertebrae and imaging an outcome, and then I'd start thinking, I'm going to be living in a wheelchair, or should I sell my practice?
So you were thinking about the way you wanted your body to look and feel in your mind.
I reconstructed every single vertebrae.
In the mind?
Yeah, in my mind. I wanted to show it exactly 3-dimensionally. Yeah.
In your mind?
In my mind.
You're not drawing it out? Or
No, in my mind I was reconstructing.
You're visualizing it.
Yeah, visualizing it. And I wanted to say, look, take a look at that. Because this intelligence is always present, right? So we got to be present with it. So I'd start off reconstructing my spine, and then I'd be like, oh gosh, should I sell my practice? What if I live in a wheelchair?
And you practice chiropractic practice at the time?
Yeah, in Southern California, in La Jolla. So I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted to do, and then after 6 weeks, I just went through the whole thing, and I felt like I hit a golf ball right in the sweet spot. Something clicked, and from that point forward, what took me 2.5 or 3 hours to do, I was able to do in 45 minutes. I was firing and wiring, you know, these new circuits, and I was practicing paying attention. And then all of a sudden, I started noticing dramatic changes in my health like this. And the moment I started noticing changes in my body, what was going on outside of me, I started correlating at what I was doing inside of me. Now I was just hooked, and I just started doing it with more passion and more sincerity. Anyway, back on my feet in 10.5 weeks, back training at 12 weeks, back in my clinic, and I just made a deal with myself that if I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter. And then that led me to just stop everything in my life. I just wasn't the same guy. I'd just been initiated into something, and sold my practice, sold my home.
You sold it all?
Sold it all, moved to the Northwest, and just started asking bigger questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What are we doing? What happens when we die? And how did all this happen for me? What was the process? So I started studying the science behind it, and I couldn't find it in any conventional textbooks because this was unconventional, right? And miraculous is kind of unconventional. So I started studying quantum physics and neuroscience and epigenetics, and it started making sense. I started building this model of understanding. Then I asked the fundamental question, has anybody else done it? So then I traveled to 17 different countries and interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people with serious health conditions that were treating either conventionally or unconventionally. They were staying the same or getting worse, and all of a sudden they got better. So what was the cause that produced the effect, you know? And the stories and what I learned was so amazing. I went back to school and studied neuroscience. because mind was such a strong element. It wasn't diet, it wasn't celibacy, it wasn't any of those things. It was just really this element. And so then I was able to figure out that there were 4 common things. And then I wrote a book about it, and then I thought, God, if this works really on people that were sick and are better, and they come from all walks of life, all colors, all races, all genders, sexual preferences, but all of a sudden, I wanted to see if I was able to reproduce it. So then I started seeing, okay, let's see if we can teach this, be able to reproduce the outcome, because that's science, right? So I went through about...
What were the 4 common things?
The first one was that they all believed and accepted that there was an intelligence that lived within them that was giving them life. And
these people you interviewed who had had injuries that overcame them?
No, these are people with cancer, MS, lupus, Parkinson's disease.
Who got better?
Yeah, just spontaneously. It's called a spontaneous remission.
Got it. So they believed there was an intelligence.
There was some invisible life force that they were connected to, that they felt like they had lost their connection to. They became separate and disconnected from. And that when they got the diagnosis, they woke up and said, man, I got to connect again, and I got to connect to my essence. And so they developed a relationship with it, just like you develop a relationship with anybody. It takes time, you got to be present, you got to connect, you got to experience, you got to be present. All of these things are important elements. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that they realized that it was the mismanagement of their emotions and the hormones of stress that really began to create their condition. Now, stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. Stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. We have an innate mechanism in our body that returns us back to order. So then if someone cuts you off on the LA freeway, you have an emotional reaction, but 15 minutes later you're back to driving and you're over it, right? That's all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress.
But when it's all day long, all week, all year.
Yeah, so if you're reacting to, like if Tyrannosaurus Rex is chasing you, you have to make a decision. Am I going to use 20% of my energy or am I going to use 100%? So it turns out when you're reacting to traffic...
200%.
Oh, right, or if you're reacting to your coworker sitting in the cubicle next to you,
right.
You're turning on that response, and what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive, because when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because nobody can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. Well, human beings, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. You can think about your problems, and you're producing the same biological effects. So those chemicals give the brain and body a rush of energy. And people become addicted to that rush of energy. So now they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need the bad job. They need the poor relationship. So that means they become addicted to the life that they don't even like. Right?
Why do we need the bad job or bad relationship and stay stuck in those?
Because it's a conditioned response. So listen, if you get angry at a coworker and all of a sudden you get an arousal in your brain and body, right? You get a rush of energy. When you start noticing that your body starts dropping, your brain starts noticing your energy starts dropping, you're automatically going to have the image of the coworker in order to what? Give your body the next jolt, right? So all of a sudden, people become addicted to their own thoughts, right? So these people realize that, oh my God, I've been mismanaging my attention and energy, and I gotta get beyond my past. I got to get beyond these emotions. I got to make some big changes. I got to break the habit of being myself. You know, I got to stop being this person. Now, that sounds really good theoretically and philosophically, but change is such a hard thing, really hard. Right? Because the moment you come back to your senses and you step back into your life and you see that person, or you go to that place, or you're with that experience, so many people are unconsciously reacting in their thoughts and feelings to everything in their environment. So now their environment is controlling how they think and feel. So they realize that in order to change,
you got to change the environment.
They got to be greater than their environment, greater than the conditions in the world, greater than the circumstances.
Be mindful of that every time it comes up. To be like, okay, I'm going to think differently.
Right.
I'm not going to react this way.
I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back, because the moment you start reacting emotionally, emotions are a record of the past. And if those emotions are driving your thoughts, you're thinking in the past. And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, you're creating more of your past, right? So it turns out that the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, these loops that people get caught in, condition their body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion. Which means now their body, as their unconscious mind, is believing they're living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. What's the relevance behind that? Well, the latest research on genes says genes don't create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease.
The emotional environment or the physical environment?
Your environment, any environmental reaction. But if you're reacting emotionally to your environment the same way, you're signaling the same gene in the same way, and now you're headed for a genetic destiny. So the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease. If you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, your thoughts could make you sick. And if your thoughts could make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts could make you well? So they began to realize that, oh my God, the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking caused me to feel guilt, and I don't even know it's guilt, it just feels like me. It's just, I'm used to this same chemical continuity. Now, the moment they decided to change, anytime you decide to change and change anything about yourself, get ready, because it's going to feel uncomfortable.
It's going to hurt.
You're going to leave the known.
Yeah.
You're going to leave the familiar, and you're going to step into the unknown.
Even if the familiar is uncomfortable and painful,
right.
It's still going to be painful leaving the pain.
Right, because some people are super happy being unhappy.
Right.
So then they would rather cling to their suffering than take a chance in possibility. So these people said, I really have nothing to lose, right? So then they said, I'm willing to be uncomfortable and be in the unknown. And it turns out that's the perfect place to create from. So when the body is conditioned to become the mind, then to change is to be greater than the body, right?
Because how do we become greater than the body?
Well, that's a whole nother conversation. But let me finish this, okay? So the third thing they said was, okay, so now that I know that I got to break the habit of being myself and I can't mismanage my thoughts and feelings, I got to change how I act, I got to watch how I speak, I got to become conscious of how unconscious I am, because 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, like a computer program, emotional reactions, unconscious beliefs and perceptions. So the first step to change is to become conscious of how you think, to notice how you act, to pay attention to how you feel. And the act of observing those states of mind and body separates you from that program. Now you're the consciousness observing that program. And it turns out the more conscious you become of how unconscious you are, lighting a match in a dark place, that first step creates enormous amounts of chaos in the brain and body. And it's disturbing, so people just go back to the same addiction, the same emotion, the same problem. This feels better. No, that feels familiar. So they said, okay, now I got to change. I got to reinvent myself. Now this is really important, because they started sitting down and thinking, okay, who in history do I admire? Who are great people, role models that I could follow? What are the qualities and characteristics that they have? How am I going to change? These are what we call frontal lobe questions. The creative center of the brain switches on and the emotional center settles down. So then they started thinking, how would I have to be in a new life if I was really going to heal? What would I have to change about myself? Now, there's this interesting phenomenon that if you close your eyes and you begin to think about doing something, you're an athlete, you understand this. If you're a background in football and you are running a pattern or you are doing something, you would rehearse it in your mind. Yeah. Turns out that the act of mentally rehearsing something when you're truly present, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. In fact, your brain will begin to look like you've been doing it for the last 5 days and you've never run the course. So now your brain is no longer a record of the past, because typically it is. Now it's a map to the future. So now you're priming your brain. So that became the very platform. Experiments with piano players. You take a group of people that never played the piano before. You divide them into 2 different categories. You take one group of people, you teach them one-handed scales and chords. You do a brain scan on them. They come and practice for 2 hours a day for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, if you rescan the brain, they grow new circuits on the opposite side of the brain. Nothing magical there. You learn something new. Learning's making new connections. Get some instruction. You get instruction. You get your body involved. You get your body involved, you're going to have an experience. Experience enriches the brain. Pay attention to what you're doing. You got to pay attention and repeat it. Firing and wiring. You're going to assemble new circuits. You can take the other group of people, have them come for 2 hours a day for 5 days, do a brain scan before, the brain scan after. Have them close their eyes and mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords. At the end of 5 days, they'll grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people who actually physically demonstrated the action. What does that mean? It means not only do they change their brain by thinking differently, but their brain looks like they've been playing the piano for 5 days. Now set them in front of a piano. Never played the piano before. They'll play those scales and chords because their brain is wired to play it. So now, the act of rehearsing who they're going to be, what are the qualities, and beginning to get in this creative state, began to lay down the circuits of a new personality. And a new personality is connected to a new personal reality. So the next question is, does that change the body? Take a group of men, have them do one-handed curls in their mind, and bring an emotional component like stronger, harder, more intense, 1 hour a day for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, 13.5 increase in muscle strength.
Wow.
Never lifted a weight. Now their body is changing by thought alone.
Huh.
So these people began to reprogram their brain and body. And all of a sudden, they began to act differently. Why? Because they installed the circuits. They began to think differently, of course. They began to feel differently. They were no longer feeling pain. They're actually liking themselves, right? So then if they're living by a different emotion, and they're feeling an elevated emotion before they're healing, before they were healed, they're not waiting for their healing to feel joy and gratitude. They're feeling gratitude and joy. Now their body's believing that it's healed because the body's feeling the emotion ahead of the experience. And if the environment signals the gene and the end product of an experience in the environment is emotion, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment. And what do genes do? Genes make proteins. And what are proteins responsible? The structure and function of the body. Now you're literally becoming somebody else. And now you're turning down the genes for disease and you're turning up these other genes. So I started to realize that this reinvention process is exactly what we've always done. It's just that we get complacent in certain areas of our life and we stop. Now the last thing they had in common, the fourth thing, is that when they were doing that rehearsal process, that they had long moments where they lost track of time and space. In other words, they were so involved in their inner world of imaging that when they turned the light on in the room or they lift their blindfold up or whatever they were doing, they thought it was 20 minutes later, and it was an hour and 20 minutes later. And when you're truly focused and you're truly paying attention and you're in the present moment, all of a sudden, you will leave this three-dimensional reality. And when you leave this three-dimensional reality, there's only one other place you go, and that is the realm of thought, and that's called the quantum field. And that quantum field is where all possibilities exist, right? So they were connecting to a field of information that had everything to do with the first principle, which is that invisible intelligence that's both within us and all around us, personal and universal. It is the unifying field that governs everything material in this world. And if you're going to change something material, that means you got to get beyond your body to heal your body.
Right.
Because if you're your body trying to heal your body, there's one thing that we can guarantee: it's going to take time. It's going to just take a long time because you're playing by the rules of Newtonian physics. You play by the rules of quantum physics. Energy dictates matter. So when you're truly in the field and you're making changes there, then the downward cascade, neurologically, biologically, chemically, hormonally, genetically, is the side effect of what's happening in the field.
It accelerates.
It accelerates it, exactly. So you do it in less time because you're more connected to a realm that doesn't play by time.
How quickly can we heal something that's been inside of our body, inside of our mindset for decades that we've never let go of?
Yeah.
And it's a part of us. How quick are we able to do that from past trauma?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal with trauma, and it's kind of an interesting thing because when you're traumatized, some threat or some danger or some condition in your outer world through your senses is changing how you feel in your inner world. And the quotient of change between the way you normally feel in some alarm state, when you change your internal state and move into that emergency mode, you narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain freezes an image and takes a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory. And now that image is branded holographically into the brain. So then we remember experiences better because we can remember how they feel, and that memory then changes the person's biology. So they think neurologically within the circuits of that experience, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions, and how we think and feel becomes our state of being. So now the person biologically is changed, and many times it's the strong emotion that begins to select and instruct the gene that creates disease. Why? Because if the environment signals the gene, and that's a truth, that's epigenetics, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, the emotion that you feel from that event is literally selecting the gene for you to begin to change. And the genes make proteins. And so the person, if it's strong enough, begins to wear their trauma, not just in their brain. Now it's in their body, because every time they think about that trauma, every time they review it, every time they keep creating the imagery, they keep firing and wiring the circuits in their brain, and they keep feeling the feeling emotionally in their body. And their body is so objective that it's believing it's living in the same past experience 50 to 100 times a day. And all you need is a stimulus and a response, an image and an emotion, a thought and a feeling, and you're conditioning the body into the past. Well, you're conditioning the brain and body into the past.
And it doesn't matter if the actual event happened to you or not, because if you have the image, what I'm hearing you say, it's still going to connect to the body. So like what's happening right now is people are consuming probably more than 50, 100 pieces of media talking about trauma in the world right now.
Right.
Is that causing more physical damage on our bodies without actually having it physically hurt us?
Well, let me finish that thought, and
yes,
then people can answer that question.
Mind-blowing.
So then you asked, is it possible then that people can heal that quickly in 1 week? Yeah, because what if they create an inner event that carries an amplitude of gratitude or joy or freedom, break through from the chains of the past? And when the body is liberated and you feel that elevated emotion, the stronger the emotion you feel from that breakthrough, the more you're going to pay attention to the image in your mind. And now you're beginning to brand new circuitry in the brain, and your body's being conditioned into a new future. And the stronger the emotion you feel, and the more you pay attention to the picture, the more you're conditioning the body over time to the future instead of the past. So now you keep knocking on that genetic door emotionally, then that emotion ultimately signals a new gene that upregulates that gene to produce better proteins. And the person then all of a sudden starts healing. And we have research to show that people can do that in 4 days, signal genes to reduce cancer cells and growth, to signal stem cells to suppress, to go to active tissues and repair them and regenerate them and suppress inflammation. We have research to show that you could change the number of brain cells you have just by doing this properly. And so now all of a sudden, a person starts changing.
In 4 days,
yeah,
you can start to reverse some of the damage you've done in your body, depending on the degree of damage, it sounds like. But in 4 days, by simply replacing the imagery, the visualization, the acknowledgement to a different emotion, an emotion of joy, gratitude, peace, perspective, acceptance. I'm assuming these things.
A vision of your future.
A vision of what you want that's positive, as opposed to a vision that is tied to a negative event of the past over and over every single moment of the day. Your body will start to heal, your immune system will start to heal, and you'll start to shift your genes.
Gene expression, absolutely.
What's the difference between gene expression and just genes?
Well, you come with a lot of genes, and they're just a library of potentials. They're just a storehouse of information, of possibilities. So then you got to get the right signal, the right lock into the key that begins to select and instruct genes that cause genes to make different proteins. And you can regulate so many different genes, the same genes, you can regulate them differently. So when they upregulate, they start producing really healthy and robust proteins. And that's enzymes, that's tissue, that's structure, that's function, that's hormones. It's immunoglobulins. When they downregulate because of some alarm, when there's not a lot of energy for long-term building projects, well, then you keep doing that. Then the body starts producing cheaper proteins. It's a different signal. It's not a time for growth. And so now to answer your other question, then it makes sense then that if you have been if you had experience of trauma, say, for example, and it's created the feeling of fear, and your fear is that it could happen again. And you don't know this, but every time you think about that future, that possible worst case scenario, and you feel the emotion, you're conditioning your body to become the mind subconsciously of anxiety. So now, all you need now is some cue in your outer environment that says it's unsafe, that there's damage there, that you're a victim, something's bigger than you that could have an effect on you. Well, now that feeling of fear is going to cause you to think thoughts equal to it. So the person then no longer needs the environment to feel that fear. They just have to have the thought about that condition now. And now they're literally knocking their brain and body out of balance by thought alone. And the body's constantly living in emergency mode. And it takes a lot of energy, a lot of resources to live in emergency mode all the time.
All the time.
Guess what system becomes compromised by it?
Immune system.
Your immune system. Why? Because you have two protection systems. You got a system that protects you from dangers in your outer world. That's the gas pedal. That's the sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight or flight nervous system. Danger, threat out there. Use all the energy because you gotta survive. And when you survive, you got to take care of your body. So
Right.
So now that system can work really well short term. It doesn't work really well if you keep it on all the time. Because if you're mobilizing all that energy for some threat in your outer world, there's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. And energy leaves the brain and it leaves the heart and it moves into these lower centers because now you're tapping the body's resources because there is an emergency. But whether the emergency is real or imagined, whether your anger is valid or justified or not, that you're tapping the body's very energy to heal by doing this. And the immune system says, well, we're part of really the other nervous system. We're the brake. We're the clutch. We need to get into relaxation. We need to get back into balance again. And when we do, then we'll metabolize. Then we'll assimilate. We'll reproduce. We'll excrete properly. Mm-hmm. So now you got this kind of battle between the gas pedal and the brake. And the immune system says, hey, listen, if there's foreign agents, if there's viruses, bacteria, molds, funguses, listen, we don't have a whole lot of energy here to deal with them because we're fighting this war out there. There's no homeland security. So they shut down certain receptors in the immune system. They shut down function of those lymphocytes, those white blood cells that are your inner army of protection. And it takes a lot of energy to fight a virus and a bacteria. But if there's no energy, hey, listen, it takes energy to raise the body's temperature. Where do you think that comes from? That's part of that branch called the autonomic nervous system. And the sympathetic, the gas pedal, is part of it. And the parasympathetic is the clutch, is part of that autonomic nervous system. And it's a check and balance. But so you stay in emergency for an extended period of time. And now you're exposed to some antigen or some external substance, some foreign agent, and there's no energy to deal with it, then you are victim to your environment, because every time you react to your environment and you say that person, that circumstance is controlling the way I feel and the way I think, if something outside of you is controlling your feelings and thoughts, then it makes you a victim to your environment. So then, so you will be more victimized, or you could be more of a victim to other things in your environment. People don't understand this consciously because it's a program subconsciously. So now, if you begin to strengthen your inner environment now, this is where our work comes in, because we have research to show that when you place your attention right here in your heart, this center right here, this is the beginning of our divinity. This is our center of oneness, our wholeness. This is where we begin to feel love, gratitude, compassion, kindness, care, freedom, joy. It's all these elevated emotions that are heartfelt emotions. That our research shows that when you begin to teach people how to open this center, and you teach them a formula on how to practice it, that if they did that for 4 days, that they would begin to strengthen their immune system by 50%. And now let me tell you why. Because in the center is your heart, but what most people don't know, there's another gland in there called the thymus gland. Thyme leaf. It's named after the thyme leaf. And the thymus gland has two functions. It has an endocrinological function. It makes growth hormone. That's our youth center. And it makes strong immune chemicals, and it has an immunological function. So when you're living by stress and your heart is racing and you're stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time because you can't run, you can't fight, you can't hide, and you got the gas and the clutch going, energy is going to leave the heart and it's going to the adrenal center, and you're going to cause contraction in the arteries in your heart, and this center will shut down from blood flow. And so there's no energy in the heart. So you teach a person then how to begin to open the center and to start feeling elevated emotions through their heart. And you teach them how to switch or convert from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. Well, all of a sudden now, this thymus gland, which normally shrinks with age, starting at puberty, the fountain of youth now, all of a sudden begins to get new blood flow. And there's new hormones that are signaled, like oxytocin and vasopressin, and all these different chemicals called nitric oxide and endothelial-derived relaxing factor, and the arteries in the heart begin to swell with energy and blood flow, and this center switches on, and now it says, man, this feels good, and this is a time for us to really get back into balance, and really let's strengthen our inner world now. And now all of a sudden, this thymus gland begins to make thymosin, which is an important agent that begins to make T cells. And T cells have little receptors on them called T cell receptors. And when those T cell receptors are robust and strong, those cells make proteins, and they make what's called antibodies or immunoglobulins. And these little Y-shaped proteins block the receptors coming from the virus that are trying to attack the white blood cells. They have a shield, and now they're immune to the virus and its attack with its receptor, and it can literally begin to inject it with these immunoglobulins, primarily immunoglobulin A, and that begins to cause the virus to not survive. And then that white blood cell will pass another white blood cell and pass on the memory to it, so it already knows what's coming. So now, all of a sudden, you're making these immunoglobulins, and now your inner world now can combat anything that's a foreign agent.
Why is this stuff really taking off now in the last year and a half? Because you've been doing this work for a couple decades now, right?
Yeah.
2 decades?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Almost 2 decades. And you've been in tons of documentaries, movies, you've been doing interviews for a long time, but really it's taken off in the last year. And you said, because now we have evidence about a lot of things that you're working on, the things that you've been believing for so many years that you knew worked for you, and you saw transformation with yourself. We're not going to go into your accident because that's in the last interview. But now we have proof and evidence and science backing all this. And how did that start to happen?
Yeah, it's a great dialogue because I think this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And if you rewind the tape 10 years ago, you know, information was the thing that stimulated thought, stimulated new ideas. And as we learn new things, we make new connections in our brains. So as we begin to add new stitches into that three-dimensional tapestry in our mind, we're beginning to cause our mind to function in new ways. But the key then is to apply it, to personalize it, to do something with it. And 10 years ago, when I got in front of an audience and talked about the application, nobody wanted to step outside that philosophical, theoretical, intellectual realm, right? Because doing something means you're going to have to change something about yourself.
Painful.
Yeah, you're going to get uncomfortable, right? And I think we're in an age of information, and in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. And because of technology, we have access to so much content, and information creates awareness. And awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. They work together. So there's an energetic change, I think, that's taking place in the world right now where people are so informed that old models, old paradigms are beginning to break down, whether it's the medical model or the religious model, the education model, journalism, the economy, you know, politics. It's all beginning to come to the surface because something else has to come out. And I think that one of the things that people are realizing is that you don't have to be a Buddhist monk to do this or a nun with 40 years of devotion. You just got to understand the formula. And just like any skill or anything you learn, you got to go from thinking to doing to being. You got to take knowledge, you create the experience, and if you keep doing it over and over again, you start getting a skill or you start getting wise about how to do it. And you know that you know how to do it. Well, in the last 10 years, we have assembled a scientific team, and let's see if you can really make significant brain changes. I don't want those changes to just be in your mind. I want them to be in your brain. I want to be able to see before and after pictures to say that person has a significant change after a traumatic brain injury or anxiety or depression or a cyclic mood disorder or a stroke. We want to see that there's been significant change. At the same time, let's measure your brain in real time and let's look to see what that transformation process looks like. And in the discovery, Lewis, of that process, we gained so much knowledge about what that transformational process looks like. In other words, I can tell you without a doubt that if you're analyzing your life right now within some disturbing emotion, that 100% of the time you're going to make your brain worse.
If you think about your life,
if you're stuck in an emotion, like you're frustrated, you're angry, you're fearful, resentful, and you're thinking within that emotional state. In other words, you can't think greater than how you feel. That means then you were thinking in the past because those emotions are a record or residue of the past. So we see people in the process of change that are analyzing in duality or polarity. That kind of drives the brain into higher states of arousal and further away from true change. So we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of brain scans, and we now know that there's a formula to create greater brain coherence, greater brain efficiency, to make your brain work better. And when your brain works better, you work better. At the same time, it requires a clear intention and an elevated emotion to begin to change your energy and to change your life. And nobody changes until they change their energy, right? So then how do you get a person out of resentment, frustration, into joy and freedom? Why would they feel grateful or joyful or free if the experience hasn't happened? So most people are spending the majority of their life waiting for something out there to take away their emptiness or pain or the resentment in here. Well, if they're waiting their whole life in separation or lack, then and we create reality, then the lack is driving certain thoughts, which is creating more separation and more lack. So teaching people then to begin to condition their body emotionally before the evidence takes place in their life is breaking a significant habit, right? Yes. So instead of living by cause and effect, now we're beginning to cause and effect. So the moment you start feeling whole and grateful, we now know your healing will begin at that moment.
Yes.
The moment you start feeling worthy and abundant, your wealth is coming. You know, you're generating a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of wealth. And so
how does someone feel worthy, though, if they've always been told they're not worth it?
Yeah, well, so
or that's the story they tell themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not worth it because
Yeah.
she didn't say yes when I asked her on a date.
Right.
Because he broke up with me, because I got fired, because my parents left me. How am I worth it when there's so much evidence or story around a negative thing?
Let's stop telling the story of your past and let's start telling the story of your future. And people who aren't defined by a vision of the future, for the most part, are left with memories of the past. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. So most people wake up in the morning and they start thinking about their problems. And those problems are memories that are tattooed in the brain that are associated to certain people and things at certain times and places. So the moment the person wakes up clean slate, they start thinking about the problems they're thinking in the past. If you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, well, there's a possibility that your past is going to be your future. Every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So then the moment you start recalling the problem, you start feeling unhappy. Now your body's in the past, because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body, and how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. So people reaffirm their identity based on the past, right? And it turns out that the redundancy of doing that, conditioning only requires an image and an emotion. And most people are unconsciously conditioning their body into the familiar past, into the known. So now if you're in the familiar past and in the known, you're going to crave the predictable future, right? That's the known as well. And there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that's the eternal present moment. That's the sweet spot of the generous present moment. So you gotta labor to get that person beyond the emotions that keep them tacked or anchored to the past. And yes, It takes an effort to do that, but if you keep working with the formula, you'll reach that elegant moment where there's a liberation of energy. And now your body, as the unconscious mind, the objective mind, is not believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, because you're liberating the body from that emotional state. So you ask a person, why are you so unhappy? Why are you so frustrated? Why are you so resentful? The moment you ask that, their brain is going to associate that emotion to a past event.
To a memory.
To a memory.
Yeah.
That's because they have nothing to look forward to in their future. So if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, it just means to me that you're more in love with your past than you are with the future. So how do you teach people to believe in a future that they can't see or experience with their senses yet, but they've thought about enough times in their mind that their brain is literally changed to look like the event has already occurred? The latest research in neuroscience says that's absolutely possible. We know that. And how do you teach a person to select a new possibility in their future and begin to emotionally embrace that future before it's made manifest to such a degree that their body, as their unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, and they're signaling new genes and new ways ahead of the environment. Now, till their body begins to change to look like the event has already occurred. We've proven that that's possible. Now think about this.
So the more you think about your desired future, the joy, the gratitude, the feelings you want to have that are more positive, the more you think about it as a future thing happening, the more your body shifts now.
Exactly. So your body is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment. Now think about this. The stronger the emotion you feel from some condition in your life, the more altered you feel inside of you, the more you narrow your focus on the cause, and the brain freezes an image and takes a snapshot. And that memory now is embossed in the brain. It's branded in there. So then people think neurologically within the circuits of those past experiences, and they feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And the stronger the betrayal, the stronger the trauma, the more the body's living in the past, right?
Crazy.
So how do you reverse that? So now, if you truly got passionate about a future, we've all done this. You get a wild idea in your mind and you start holding on to that vision and you're preoccupied with it. All of a sudden, the thought in your mind becomes the experience, and you start feeling the energy of the future.
Yeah.
Now, the stronger the emotion you feel from that vision, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind, and now you're remembering your future.
And vice versa, the stronger you pay attention to the feeling of the past, pain, you're going to create the pain in this moment.
Exactly. So it requires a coherent brain, and we now know that there's a formula for that, and we've got beautiful research to show that people can do it. They just have to practice. And it requires a coherent heart, because resentment, frustration, impatience creates a very incoherent heart.
Yeah.
And when that heart becomes incoherent, you stop trusting yourself. There's no energy there. You stop trusting in your future.
Wow.
So then, if there's physical evidence in your brain and body, physical evidence to look like the event has already occurred, it's quite possible you'll be thinking neurologically within the circuits of your future, and you'll begin to feel chemically within the boundaries of that emotion of your future. And how you think and how you feel is your state of being. And now your state of being is living in the future instead of the past. Now, the moment you disconnect from the emotion of your future because of traffic or some coworker or your ex or whatever people come up with, now you're back to the energy of your past. And now you're going to start looking for it, analyzing, why hasn't it happened? Well, if you're feeling the emotion of your future, why would you look for it? Because you would feel like it already happened, and that is the place where the magic happens. So then you can't just do this, get up, and then return back to your old state of being. You got to maintain that modified state of mind and body.
How do you maintain it when life
practice.
happens?
Well, let me finish.
If I punch you in the face right now, how do you maintain
Well, of course. I mean, we all take blows in our lives,
Yeah.
and we all react emotionally. But the question is, how long are you going to react?
Right.
So then, if you can't mediate and regulate your emotional reactions, and those emotions linger for days, that's a
years for some people.
Mood, and then months, temperament, years, personality trait. So then the person's personality is literally based on the past. But they don't know that because they're doing it over and over again, and it becomes a subconscious program. So now, if it requires a coherent brain and a coherent heart, then we have to train people how to self-regulate. So We've done thousands and thousands of measurements. We've partnered with the Heart Math Institute to teach people how to create and sustain heart coherence.
How do we do it?
Well,
besides going to your workshop, what's the simplified version? I'm sure it takes more time than...
Well, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. It just requires getting still, closing your eyes, putting your attention on your heart, changing your breath so that you move into the present moment. And when you slow your breathing down, you slow your brainwaves down. When you slow your brainwaves down, now you're accessing your autonomic nervous system. So then you train a person how to open their heart and feel an elevated emotion. And it takes a little practice. And just like a flower that takes time to bloom, it takes a little bit of time. But if you work in trading the resentment, the frustration, or the impatience for gratitude, appreciation, and thankfulness, and you keep at it, there'll come a moment where that system switches on, and now you're feeling grateful for no reason at all. Now, that's not a bad thing, because gratitude, the emotional signature of gratitude, means something's happening to you, something has happened to you, you're receiving something, or you just received something. So your body then, when you're feeling gratitude, is in the perfect state of receiving. So then that means then you'll accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to the emotional state of gratitude. If you're living in resentment, you're living in fear, you're living in impatience, you could say, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, and with all you want, and that thought's going to stop right at the brainstem and never make its way to the body, because the body's
not feeling it, or because why?
Because you're feeling resentment, and that thought that thought is not consistent with the emotion of resentment. Resentment has a different set of thoughts, right? In other words, once you start opening your heart, it begins to move into coherence. It begins to produce a measurable magnetic field up to 3 meters wide. Now that's frequency, that's energy. And all that energy, that frequency, carries information, carries an intent. So then when you're feeling gratitude and your heart is open, you're broadcasting energy into the field. Now,
frequency.
A frequency. You lay the intent of the thought of your health or your wealth. That frequency can carry the thought of your wealth. It can carry the thought of your health. If you're suffering, suffering does not carry, that energy does not carry the thought of your wealth. It carries a different set of thoughts. So then we're teaching people how to self-regulate, because if you're going to believe in that future that you're imagining with all of your heart, it better be open and activated. And you better know how to self-regulate. And you have to know the moment you disconnect from the energy of your future because of some circumstance in your life and you lose that feeling, if you're practicing it on a daily basis with your eyes closed, then the next level is to be able to open your eyes and do it right in the moment and be able to self-regulate and change the frustration from some experience in your life back to the energy of your future. Now, that requires great awareness and great effort. But if you have a community of people that are practicing this on a daily basis and they're connected to their future, because that's where their mind is, they begin to want the future more than the emotions of the past. So we've done enough measurements now, Louis, to know that we can teach people how to do that, and we have evidence that people can sustain it for 45 minutes to an hour. It's a skill now. They know that they know how to do it. So now they have brain coherence and heart coherence. Well, once the heart begins to become orderly and coherent, it acts as an amplifier and it drives energy to the brain. So now the brain is getting more energy once the heart is open, and then you're thinking a different set of thoughts. And those thoughts produce different chemicals for you to feel more of that. And here comes nitric oxide from oxytocin, and then all of a sudden your heart literally starts to swell. It literally begins to open up, and there's more energy going there, and now you're coming from a different level of mind.
Growing up in this religion that I grew up, it was a constant reminder, a daily practice to think in a certain way, to think that you can never be physically harmed, that you're infinite love, that you're infinite light, your infinite soul, spirit, life, truth, and love, right? It was a constantly taught to me that I'm never able to get physically harmed. And that if you are, that means your thought is off, and you just have to recorrect your thought and you'll have a healing, right? It's a little extreme for some because, and if you're not, you know, well practiced in it, and if you don't know how to really manage the thoughts and train, then you can hurt yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You can really hurt your body, and that's, you know, it happened. Right?
Yeah.
It happened for times. But I use this, you know, philosophy, strategy, technique, idea in sports. And I would rehearse constantly, like you talked about, I was constantly rehearsing the games, what I wanted to create for the season, for my body, for my life. And it just seemed like it would always happen. You know, I would rehearse constantly over and over and get lost in my thoughts. You call it the quantum field, is that what you call it? So I was in the quantum field to be on the physical field. I was playing in the quantum field just like I'd be playing on the physical field.
Exactly.
And I remember I would watch game film of world record holders in track and field and football and watch them every single night and mentally rehearse the same movements they would have before I would fall asleep. And then I would practice the next day. But I was constantly rehearsing in my mind how I wanted to show up. I was rehearsing this moment. You know, in my life, 10 years ago, I was rehearsing what I'd be doing this year in my life. Do you do this on a daily practice for yourself? And if so, how does that rehearsal look like?
I do. So two things I wanted to say about that. I mean, first of all, this is really not for everybody. I mean, because you gotta be, it's like pregnancy. Either you are or you're not. I mean, there's no in between.
A little pregnant?
You can't be kind of a little pregnant. Either you are or you're not. And so you can't.
Who is it for and who's it not for?
Yeah, what I found is that when I started studying spontaneous remissions, it was for people who had reached the end of their emotional belief where there was no longer any answers. The doctors gave up on it, they had nothing else to do, right? And so they changed everything about themselves. And some of them were physicians, you know, it's just going like, wow, well, what have I been doing? But now fast forward to today. I mean, in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. I mean, you got so much information. You don't need a doctor. You don't need a teacher. You don't need a priest or a minister to gain information. You don't need an authority, right? Technology gives us the very quick information. So now people are informed. 20 years ago, a doctor said, do you have this health condition?
You believed it.
Yeah, and not only that, you signed on the dotted line and you got the treatment or the surgery. Fast forward to today, everybody just kind of goes, wait a second.
There's multiple opinions,
yeah,
let me get this.
You go home and you research it and you say, I want to try this. So now all of a sudden people are taking their power back. So people are more informed. So surgical procedures, pharmaceuticals are not always the first choice for people because there's other ways. And people only do the best with what's available. So now information has scaled and changed the way people face off with health conditions. And now people are coming into this, number one, if they have a health condition that they can self-correct. And number two, there are people that are saying, if I'm headed for a genetic destiny, because my mother had this health condition, my father had this, and I know the gene doesn't create it, but how I act and how I feel is going to signal the same gene. Well, I'm going to just change my genetic future. So now people are super proactive in the process, right? So that's point number one. But point number two is that if you start realizing that this is actually possible, and I can tell you that without a doubt it is, because we were talking before we started, the things that I'm witnessing, I mean, if in the beginning it was just like a person got a little better, you felt a little this, a little that, you know, their food allergies went away, and, but then all of a sudden we're talking about, in our last event, 2 people with stage 4 cancer, completely reversed. Wow. A woman with a very serious neurological disorder, they couldn't even name it. Crutches, the whole bit, left the event, no crutches. Well, how did she do that? Well, let me ask you a question. If she doesn't look like a movie star and she's not buffed and young and attractive and successful, she's just like a normal person, and you listen to this person's story, and there's 1,000 people listening to that story, you're going to scratch your head and say, wow, if she can do it, so can I. And just like, you know, an infection spreads amongst a community that creates disease, health and wellness can be as infectious as disease. Right. So do I use it? Yes, but not in the way that people think. Like, I'm not interested in success. I've had it. I know that that's an important element. I think success is a side effect of who you are. But what am I after? I'm after making a difference in the world. I want people to become empowered. So my rehearsals, my meditations, and connecting are all about the next thing that we can push the envelope for. In other words, if that person healed themselves of that health condition and this person healed themselves, is it possible for that person to heal another person? And if they can heal that other person, which is now happening, is it possible to heal somebody on the other side of the planet? But you just have to build the model and then come up with the science to be able to piece it together. And science, turns out, is the language to help to demystify that process. So I now know, without a doubt, if you give people sound scientific information, and every time they learn something new, they're adding new connections in their brain. That's what learning is.
Wow.
And if they can begin to pay attention for just 1 hour, now they're causing jungles of neurons to begin to organize as a platform of understanding. If I say to you, now turn to the person next to you and explain what I said, and we do this in our events, if you can turn to the person next to you and explain what you said, you've wired it in your brain. What's the relevance of that? Now, you're installing the neurological hardware in your brain in preparation for an experience. And if the more you understand what you're doing and why, the how gets easier.
Right.
And if nothing's left to conjecture, superstition or dogma or spiritual new age stuff, but it's grounded in science, you're going to have more intention behind what you're doing, and you're going to assign more meaning to it.
More believable.
Exactly.
Not just blind faith.
No,
but
it's
something's backing it as
right.
well. Yeah.
And then if we can set up the conditions in the environment and give people the proper instruction, and on those people that get their behaviors to match their intentions and their actions equal to their thoughts, think of their mind and body working together, they're going to have a new experience. And that experience then is going to enrich even more circuits in the brain. The end product of an experience is an emotion. And all of a sudden they're going to feel unlimited, they're going to feel empowered, they're going to feel successful, they're going to feel worthy. Now they're teaching their body chemically to understand what their mind is intellectually understood. Knowledge is for the mind, but experience is for the body, and they're embodying that information. Well, they've done it once, should be able to do it again. And while you keep repeating the experience, you know this as an athlete, it's going to become automatic.
Right.
It's going to become innate. It's going to become second nature. It's going to become who you are. You don't have to think about it any longer. So take a person who was abused as a child with an alcoholic parent who has a very rare genetic disorder. They've manifested weakness in their bones because that's the emotion they live by. Genetic disorder that medical science says we have no way to help you. How do you explain after a year of every day going after it, overcoming herself to become someone else, that no more any fractured bones, no evidence of broken bones, no more crutches, no more wheelchair, running again? How do you explain that except she literally became someone else? She became somebody else. The disease existed in the old personality. She's not that person any longer.
Wow.
No, so biologically, that's absolutely possible. So for me, I chase the mystical. I want those profound moments where I cannot go back to being the same guy again. Because once you taste that wine or you drink from that well, all of a sudden, the way you perceive reality changes. Because you start to see things that always existed, but you didn't have the circuitry in place to perceive them. Why? Because the inner event is an experience. An experience enriches the brain. We don't see things how they are. We see things how we are. So as you begin to change your circuitry, you're going to perceive more of reality. And why? Because we probably perceive 1% of reality. So how do we begin to fully engage, right? So for me, none of that matters. None of that veneer stuff matters. What matters is the essence. What matters is, am I making a difference in the world? How can I begin to affect a change and help people to heal or create a better life for themselves, and not do it matter to matter, you know, with bravado and adrenaline and all that. That's the old way. This is about connecting, and instead of going and getting it, creating a field where you draw it to you, and the synchronicities and the coincidences and the opportunities that are coming to you as a result of you doing the inner work, you're going to rush less in your life, and you're going to be more aware of your energy. And nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. But that doesn't mean you change your energy, do a meditation, and you get up and then get on the freeway and flip people off.
Right.
You just disconnected from the energy of your future. You got to be greater than the conditions in your environment. You got to maintain that state of being. You got to be greater than the habits and emotions of your body. And you got to sustain it for an extended period of time.
How do we change our energy, and how do we sustain it for an extended period of time? How long does that time need to be until we really start to see?
And sometimes immediate. Okay, so our research, and we've done in the last 6 years, because we were seeing so many incredible things going on in our workshops. I mean, people stepping out of wheelchairs and all kinds of crazy things.
You're like a church.
We're kind of like
a church, like a mega church, yeah.
But hopefully not that.
Based in science.
Yeah, but
isn't it amazing that some of these churches, when people get to believe, whether they have science backing it or not, it's the belief in the mind.
They step out into the unknown.
And you can step out of your body and heal yourself, right?
Instantaneously.
And we do see that a lot. And some people are like, how can that be possible?
Well, how can it be possible? Well, look, we've
done the research now.
I've assembled a team of scientists. We've done 8,500 brain scans. I can tell you when a person's about ready to change. I can tell you why people don't change. I can tell you what it takes to change.
So what's it take to change?
Well, you change. Most people keep their attention, always their awareness on their body. They keep their attention on everything in their environment, people and things. Their brain is always scanning everything around us to determine what's known and unknown, what's safe and unsafe, right? And, we do that all the time. So our research shows that the moment you take your attention off your body and you go from somebody to nobody, you take your attention off the people in your life and go from who you identify with, from someone to no one. And so many people spend their whole life building an identity of being someone. Take your attention off your cell phone, your computer, your car, and go from something to nothing. Take your attention off where you're sitting, where you need to be, someplace you have to go from somewhere to nowhere. And take your attention off time, linear, thinking about the predictable future, the familiar past, and fall into the generous present moment and go from some time to no time. Then all you're left with is consciousness. And that's the moment you're no longer playing by the same rules of matter to matter. And there's a very elegant moment that takes place in the brain. In fact, I was just showing my research to a group of researchers in Santa Cruz this past week, and they were blown away. And I said, now watch, this person's going to have a transformational moment. They said, how do you know? I go, I've seen enough of these. And the next moment, the whole brain just lights up. That person is switched on. They'll never be the same person again. They're having a transcendental moment. And we could actually predict it and teach it now. It's a formula. Just like you doing sports, it just becomes a formula.
Sure.
And then you change the formula and you add to it, right? So when you no longer are identifying with your body, your environment, and time, that's the moment you're pure consciousness. Now,
you're just an idea.
You're an awareness.
Awareness
that has nothing to do with local space and time. And now, if you're
you
no
can go
longer
beyond anything.
You can go beyond, and that's when the brain, because the brain doesn't change the brain. It takes a long time. It takes a long time for the personality to change the personality, for the ego to change the ego. The programs to change the programs takes forever. Matter takes a long time to change matter. But when you're in this moment, you're no longer playing by those rules. Consciousness is the phenomenon above matter. In fact, consciousness is beginning to activate or manipulate circuits in the brain. People just think the brain is creating consciousness. No, consciousness is executing the brain, right? So then, if the brain can change, then the mind doesn't change the brain. Mind is the brain in action. It's consciousness that changes it. So when people begin to disengage and get beyond themselves, you are at your absolute best when you get beyond yourself. Then getting the person to that point.
How does someone get to that point?
Yeah, so we teach them that formula. We teach them to that point where all of a sudden they reach that generous present moment where they just feel connected. And when they're in that place, all the things they thought they wanted, they actually no longer want because they feel like they already have them. So then imagine living your life from that place. You would be less judgmental, you would be less frustrated, you would be less impatient.
Less reactive,
And so the formula then is that it requires a clear intention, which is a coherent brain. And when you're living stressed out and something goes wrong, and you're threatened, or you can't predict an outcome, or you have the perception that something's getting worse, or you can't control it, you switch on that fight or flight nervous system that we talked about. Now here's what happens. When that occurs, you start shifting your attention from one person to one problem, to one thing, to another person, to another place, because your brain is trying to predict the next moment. Well, every one of those people and things and places has this neurological network in your brain. So as you shift your attention from one to the next, it's like a lightning storm in the clouds. Your brain starts firing very incoherently. And when your brain is incoherent, you're incoherent. And when you're living by the hormones of stress, not a time to create.
No.
Not a time to open your heart. Not a time to learn. Not a time to trust. And it's a time to run, fight, or hide. So people spend 70% of their time of their life living in this state.
Wow.
So think about it. So
miserable.
Then, yeah. So then, when you're under stress, if there's a cougar around the corner, you're not going to sit down and meditate. You're not going to sit still, right? But so
jump
imagine,
off a tree.
here you got the survival gene switched on, and nobody is going to believe in possibility when you're living in survival, right?
Wow, yeah.
So then, when you're living in stress, what happens is you narrow your focus on the cause. You narrow your focus on matter, the object, the thing. And so people get switched on, and all of their attention is on their outer world. When the hormones of stress kick on, your body gets an arousal, now your attention is on the body. And of course, when you're under stress, you're trying to predict the future based on the past. And now you're literally enslaved into three-dimensional reality. So then how do you get what you want? You got to try harder, you got to force it more, you got to work harder, you got to fight for it. It's matter trying to change matter.
It's exhausting.
And people just burn out, right? So then we now know that when you go from a narrow focus on something and you begin to open your focus, you create a sense, an awareness, that the act of opening your focus causes you to stop thinking. And if you stop thinking, you no longer activate those circuits, and you start to slow your brainwaves down. And as you slow your brainwaves down, you start connecting to that autonomic nervous system, the thing that's giving you life. And all of a sudden, when you get beyond yourself, it says, he's gone. Let's step in and just clean up this mess before he gets back.
Really?
And its job is to create order and balance.
So your body will start to do that for you.
The innate intelligence will step right in. Once you connect, you got to connect. So you got to know how to change your brain waves. You can't change your brain waves and you stay in that active state. You're basically moving furniture around. You're analyzing your life within some disturbing emotion. And I can tell you, after looking at all those brain scans, if you're analyzing your life within some disturbing emotion, you're going to make your brain worse. In fact, you are thinking in the past, right? So you teach people the formula, how to open their focus, change their brainwaves, connect to that invisible field, and all of a sudden different compartments of the brain start synchronizing. The front of the brain starts talking to the back of the brain. The right side starts talking to the left side. And all of a sudden, what syncs in the brain links in the brain. And all of a sudden, you see this person starting to feel more like themselves. And when you see those two hemispheres of the brain start lighting up, watch out, because that person's going to feel really whole. Just 10 minutes a day, 3 times a day with 120 people, trading resentment, frustration, fear for gratitude, appreciation, and thankfulness. Measuring their immune response, the chemical immunoglobulin A, your primary defense against bacteria and viruses, the best flu shot you'll ever get, lives innately within you. Turns out when you're frustrated, when you're impatient, when you're fearful, the immune system dials down because you're in emergency. All your energy is going for some threat in your outer world. There's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. But how do you turn that around? So then, as people begin to open their heart, can that chemical begin to elevate? 4 days, 50% change in the 120 people. Their IgA levels went up 50% in 4 days. Wow. That's your body's immune system is now upregulating genes that are making proteins and immunoglobulins and antibodies that you don't need a flu shot. In other words, your inner state is greater than your outer world. So then, just by doing that, we now know that your immune system is going to get stronger. By the same means, take 120 people or 50 people and measure 7,500 gene regulations. Okay? In 4 days, 2 genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors are activated and upregulated. The genes that stimulate stem cells to go to damaged tissues and repair them, upregulated. The gene for oxidative balance is upregulated. Anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. Just your body's naturally doing this. The gene for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in response to novel experiences and learning. This is 4 days. The gene switches on. The gene for more balance in the pituitary and the pancreas. The gene for the microtubules of the cells, the little fibers that respond to energy and frequency. Right. So in 4 days, we now know that you can change your genetic destiny if you just practice the inner work. We have research to show that 60 days of meditation, 5 days a week, will lengthen your life. The telomeres, the little shoestrings on the end of your DNA, get longer. That means your biological age is changing. So we have the evidence now to show people what's possible. We have brain scans that are so outside of normal that when neuroscientists see them, they're blown away, because the amount of energy that's in the brain during this transcendental moment is hundreds of times outside of normal.
Wow.
I mean, you can't make your brain do that. Something is happening to you, and that person's having a transcendental moment. And we now know that we can predict it, and we now know that we can induce it. So then there's the evidence there. Then you take our community and you see people with stage 4 cancer, with Parkinson's disease, with myasthenia gravis, with lupus, with MS, with brain injuries, with rare genetic disorders, with vertigo, tinnitus, kidney failure, all kinds of health conditions, come to a week-long event, and then at the end of that event, they make significant strides in getting beyond the emotions of the past. Now think about this. The science says that the environment signals the gene. That's epigenetics. The end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So as long as you're living by the same emotion every single day, you're signaling the same gene in the same way. And if that gene is related to a survival emotion, a stress hormone, then you're down-regulating the gene and you're creating disease. So when the person trades that emotion and really breaks free from the chains of their past, and now they're feeling an elevated emotion, well, now they're dialing down the gene for MS, and they're up-regulating the gene for health and balance. And so the person, well, you'll say to them, where's the disease? Well, I'm not the same person. I'm not the, and the side effect of that is a transformation in healing. So the funny thing about it is the person who has the healing is not talking about the healing. Whether it's blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, we have crazy evidence now. What they're talking about is how amazing they feel, because they're refreshed, they got a new lease on life. And so now we have evidence in our research, and that silences the critic to show that what's possible for people. And now we have evidence in testimony, that we have evidence where people will stand on the stage and say, hey, I broke my back in 3 places. I haven't been able to stand up straight. I came into this event hunched over. I couldn't lay down. And now this guy's jumping around on the stage. He's laying on his back. He's touching his toes. You can tell. I mean, he's having his moment. We changed somebody. Someone with Parkinson's disease can't swallow, can't chew, can't blow her nose, can't stand up. One moment, the next thing you know, she's blowing her nose, chewing, swallowing. We changed her body, we changed her life, and we changed her future. And she doesn't look like a movie star, and she doesn't look like she's a vegetarian, and she doesn't look like she's buffed. She just looks like a normal person. Now the person in the audience who's watching that and looking at this person and seeing that they're no different than them, it just starts to cause them to think, if someone else can do it, I can do it. So you see the person with the stage 4 cancer that got the voodoo curse that they have 3 months to live. And now they have no evidence of cancer in their body, and they're standing on the stage telling that story, and somebody in the audience is checking her out going, I have the same condition, and if she can do it, I'm going to step right in that footprint, and I'm going to do it the way she did it. And all of a sudden, you start seeing this change in the community in a week-long event, because once there's a breakthrough, right? I mean, it's like a 4-minute mile. It's in the field, you know? But it's not only in the field, you're seeing evidence in 3-dimensional reality, and evidence is the loudest voice right now. And so people don't want to see talking heads. Anybody can see it. On the internet, information is readily available. What they want to see is evidence. And so when you have evidence in the scientific realm, and then you have evidence in a community of people, and you're not doing anything that's so extreme that excludes anybody. It's inclusive, and we're using science as the contemporary language of mysticism. It is science that's going to demystify the mystical. If I talk tradition, culture, religion, any of those things, spiritual principles, people are going to shut off. You're going to divide an audience. But science creates community. Right. So by building a scientific model, I don't subscribe to any type of meditation, because I look at the evidence of what we've gathered in, let's see, by applying this formula, to what extent can we prove to human beings how powerful they really are? And I think that has become something that has mystified me, because when I see blind people seeing in our workshops, I have to tell you that I'm more surprised than anybody. I'm standing up there shaking my head, and we have great evidence. This, you know, one woman was she's a nurse, and one day she just wakes up and she's got a blind spot in her eye. She can't see in the lower left-hand quadrant of both eyes. 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock.
Wow.
She's a nurse. She goes to see her colleagues. They do a scan. Stroke on the optic nerve.
Wow.
And now she's legally blind. She can't drive her car. She runs her own company. She can't run her company. She can't type. She can't use the computer. She's compromised in a big way. Now with a stroke, you have 2 weeks really. That's the window. And if nerve cells are going to come back online, it's going to be those first 2 weeks.
Wow.
If they don't come back, the prognosis is live with it. Whether you have paralysis or whatever, that if a stroke causes brain damage in usually 2 to 3 weeks, you don't see much change. So they gave her the prognosis. You have to learn to accommodate and live with it. And so she wasn't satisfied with that answer, and she goes to one of her dear friends who's a physician, and the physician says, go check out the Dispenza guy. And she says, why don't you come with me? So they come to our event in Brighton in the UK
Was
together.
this within the 2 weeks, or was this later? Do you know?
Oh no, this is a year later.
Wow.
This is a year later. And
So it's supposed to be irreversible at that point.
And so she comes to the event, and she comes to the event for 2 reasons. Listen to this, to learn how to live with her handicap. That's the extent of what's possible
And have
in her
more
mind.
peace. And,
Yeah. And then create a nonprofit to help people. Those were her 2 things. So somewhere in the middle of the event, it occurs to her that she could actually possibly heal her eyes. So she goes for it. She lays down after one of the meditations we lay down at the end, and all of a sudden, like in her head, she starts feeling this heat and this crackling sensation. Now, you have one of 2 options when something like this happens.
You get scared.
You get
run
scared,
away.
it's the unknown, you contract, and your brain goes into high beta, and you disconnect.
Something's wrong. I'm hurting something.
Yeah, I'm having another stroke, whatever. Or you surrender and relax into it.
Yeah, you go in. Yeah.
And she let go, and she had the most incredible experience. She laid there for the longest time, opened her eyes, and she said it was like the lights came back on. She said, I could see completely. We sent her for a scan. The Monday morning after that week-long event, the scan that had the left lower quadrant on both eyes from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock was black. The post-scan, there isn't one black spot anywhere on her eyes.
Because she'd already done a scan a year prior.
Yeah. She had the scan. So we'll give you the evidence, but that is not natural.
Wow.
That's not normal. But how do you explain that in conventional science? I mean, the truth is that we have incredibly powerful innate qualities for regeneration and healing once you hit that button. So then she stands in the audience and gives her testimony. Other people are going to begin to realize that they can heal from a stroke, and that's exactly what's happening. A collective consciousness is happening.
What is the moment of transformation for someone like that? Like, when does someone, because I know that healing can happen in an instant. So what's the thing that triggers that instant for someone to go from disbelief to belief, and it actually transforming them in the physical body?
Yeah, we've studied this, and there's no linear correlation, because think about this. That woman is a pragmatist. She knew nothing. She wasn't spiritual in any way. She just read my books and then started practicing the meditations. Now, she was practicing those meditations for months before the event because she wanted to come and be fully prepared for it, right? So from the outside, you see this one moment.
Yep.
But what you don't see is the number of times she worked in overcoming herself and getting beyond whoever she is and getting into that place where she's far enough outside familiar territory, neurologically, chemically, genetically, that all of a sudden she connects to this. She connects. She starts connecting to that invisible field called the quantum field, and you can't connect as your body. there's nothing physical to connect to there.
Yeah.
You have to get beyond all your associations.
You know, it's interesting. I think I might have talked to you about this last time. That I grew up in a religion called Christian Science that talked a lot about this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was embedded in my mind that I'm a spiritual being and that I can never be physically hurt. Like, I'm not a material body, that there are no accidents, that there's no injury. And it was always embedded in my mind that I can never be physically harmed, or I can be instantly healed. And so my entire childhood, I had all these incredible healings quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I witnessed it all the time from other people, and everyone was always like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is something I was practicing, you know, in a different way as a child, but it's always fun for me to come back around now. Even though I don't practice that religion necessarily anymore or go to the church, I still believe the same fundamental principles that I hear you talking about in a more scientific way.
It's a good belief to have.
Yeah.
And you program children
Yeah.
you program your children that the body has an innate capacity to heal.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're less reliant on something outside of you to make something go away inside of you.
Medicine or something else.
Whatever it is, shopping,
Yeah.
video gaming, everybody's relying on their outer world to change their inner state. Problem is the moment you start feeling emptiness or lack, your brain is going to start to look for something outside of you to take it away. The problem
To fill the hole, yeah.
Right. The problem is that normally the stimulation that's created from those outer things give the body a rush, and so the receptor sites in the cells recalibrate. So you need more the next time to turn it on, right? So now
It's tough. You buy the new fancy car, and it's fun for
the novelty wears off,
and
right?
then it's a week, and then it's a day, and you're
Yeah.
like, it's never enough.
And that feeling never goes away. And so the only way that feeling is actually going to go away is when you start going inward, right? And so we've seen significant changes with people, and having that belief, it should be tested. We should test our belief around that. And my lesson through all of this is that I'm starting to realize how conditioned we are into believing how limited we are. And as you start peeling those layers away, and you break through those beliefs, those self-limiting thoughts and emotions, on the other side of that is where the miraculous happens. So you got to be willing to be in that place of discomfort long enough to reorganize order and begin to create more coherence. And then all of a sudden, you get this recalibration that goes on in the brain and body. And then the extent of that is that the ultimate thing is you start to see feedback in your life, those synchronicities, those coincidences, those opportunities. You're scratching your head going,
everything's falling into place.
hey, I'm in the right place at the right time.
Everything I think about just comes to me.
Because your energy is synchronized. Look, I mean, when you have coherence in the brain and heart, you have a laser of energy, and it could read information much better. You're living in stress, and your brain is shifting its attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place to go. Each one of those things, there's an assignment of neurological networks in the brain. So the arousal of the stress hormones drives the brain into this high frequency, and you're trying to control and predict everything in your life. And your brain circuits are firing like a lightning storm in the clouds. When your brain's incoherent, you're incoherent, and you don't have a signal. You don't have a Wi-Fi signal. You're not connected to the field. How could you connect to energy and information if your signal hasn't become orderly? So that when people synchronize their energy into coherence, they can synchronize to a possibility in the future. And the synchronicities that are feedback from the environment are just a reflection of your energy. And that's the universe saying, follow the breadcrumbs. Do it again. Follow it again. Do it again. And now all of a sudden the person's not waking up in the morning like, oh, I gotta meditate now to create my future. They're kind of going like, I'm getting out of bed because I don't want the magic to end, right? They want to sustain that state so that the old reality that they've lived in begins to transform into something new, and because there's no longer a vibrational match with everyone and everything in their past, present reality, there's a vibrational match to their future, and now their future is starting to give them signals.
There was a researcher out of Yale University that in the 1940s that was studying electromagnetic fields around living organisms. And in the 1940s at Yale University, nobody was doing this, and he was a vitalist. He wanted to understand the unseen fields around living organisms. So he started studying eggs, all kinds of eggs. Chicken eggs, swallow eggs, reptile eggs, snake eggs, salamander eggs, there's all kinds of eggs. And he was using a magnetometer, and what he found was 100% of the time, no matter what egg he measured, the positive charge was always at the head, and the negative charge was always at the tail. Well, if you have positive charge on one end and negative charge on the other end, you got an external electromagnetic field called the magnetic field. That's a magnet, right? What happens with human beings is every thought has a frequency. Every thought produces a chemical. So if you keep obsessing about your lack of finances, your lack of time, your lack of energy, lack, and those thoughts.
I don't have this. I need this.
What are the chemicals you're feeding your body? You're taking thought. It's producing a frequency, and that frequency, in the form of chemistry, is storing that thought emotionally right in your second center. You feel guilty, you feel unhappy. The moment you feel unhappy, then you generate more thoughts equal to that feeling, which makes more chemicals, and you keep taking energy from the brain and storing it in the body. If you react to people in your life and you feel anger, frustration, whether it's traffic, the news, whatever it is,
parents,
whatever, you're drawing from this field, this electromagnetic field, you're tapping that resource and you're making chemistry out of it and the field shrinks. So now, by doing that and living in survival, the body no longer is a magnet. So now you have very little energy in the brain. In fact, 5% of the energy is in the brain, and 95% is stored in the body. Now, the body's been conditioned emotionally. So a lot of energy in the body, very little in the brain. So in our work,
do we want energy to be in the brain?
We want to move energy back up to the brain. So
what does that do when we move the energy from the body to the brain or the heart?
Well, this is a great thing because once it makes it here, it's going up, right? So we do these different meditations and these different techniques to draw that energy right up to the top of the head. Now, when this energy shakes loose and it starts to move, the sympathetic nervous system switches on. And instead of releasing energy out like you're being chased by a predator or you're having an orgasm, that same energy is going up into the brain, and the brain switches on and it goes into these very high frequencies called gamma brainwave patterns. Now the person has an arousal, but the arousal isn't fear.
Not an orgasm.
Well, in the brain.
An orgasm of the mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's energy that's being released into the brain, and you can only describe it as ecstasy or bliss. So the energy of guilt that was stored from thinking and feeling in the same way releases and it travels up to the brain and is going back. And when it reaches the brain, what happens? You get more energy in the brain and it begins to produce that external field. So you're beginning to create a field around your body.
You can imagine the future as opposed to staying in something from the past.
Well, once the energy is moved, you're going to feel pretty blessed in that moment. In fact,
so we can transfer guilt, shame, insecurities into bliss.
Oh my God. Yeah, we do it all the time.
Momentarily?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we do it all the time. And the amazing thing is that rush of energy that's moving into the brain is changing the brain's physiology and producing that field. Now you have energy to heal. Now the body is a magnet again. And it's as the energy moves up the spinal cord and it starts passing through those spinal nerves, and there's a lot of dynamics going on the body. That energy that was once stored in that one of those energy centers that's released is energy to heal, energy to create a new future. You're replenishing your field, and now the body becomes more of a magnet instead of an inert piece of metal with no charge, right? So the person then who's reacting to whatever person or circumstance in their life, the stronger the emotion that they feel towards politics, towards the traffic, towards their girlfriend,
social
towards their
media,
ex, whatever, the more they're paying attention to it. But where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So we also know that when...
It's hard to create from a place of putting attention towards negative energy.
Well, you're not creating. What you're doing is you're tying up your vital life force. You're giving your power away to that person or that circumstance that you could be using to create a new life with. So when a person's sitting in their meditation, and I love doing this, we just had an event in Marco Island. I'm going to take people further than where they normally go. I know they're going to go, oh, well, I'm done with my meditation. No, you're not done. We're going to take you to that point where that feeling is so in your face and you can't turn on your cell phone. You can't get up and walk away because 1,000 people are not getting up and walking away and you're part of the community. You're sitting in the fire. And you have one of two choices. You can let that brain run on programs and hardwired patterns, and the arousal will drive your brain further out of balance, or you'll practice the formula. And as you lower the volume to that emotion, you're going to take your attention off that person or problem. Guess what? Here comes energy back to you. You're taking your power back. And now you're building your field that way. And when that happens, energy starts to move up into the heart. Once it makes it to the heart, it's going to the brain. So we start seeing people, their hearts naturally open up. And all the things they thought they wanted when they came to the event, they no longer want because they feel like they have it.
They don't need it anymore.
Because they feel like they got the feeling before the experience. So that they feel so whole that they no longer want. And they're not looking for their future anymore. You only look for it when you feel lack. When your body's conditioned emotionally into the future, why would you look for it when it feels like it's already happened? Now this is where it gets weird. Because now things start coming to you and you're no longer in need. And when it comes to you, you go, oh, here. Take it, I don't want it. I just wanted to know that I could create it. And people create a lot of wealth in our events.
Yeah.
And the first thing a lot of people do is they say, I'm buying a cruise for you. I'm buying you your car. Oh, Mom, I'm getting you that house. Why do they do that? Because they're so excited. They feel so amazing. And they're thinking, I could do this again. Why would a person in lack wouldn't give? A person who's abundant would give because they know how to create. So now the game changes. It's no longer about the self. And you're doing it because that you know that you can create it. So then maintaining that state, when you're in love,
yes,
when you're in love, in it,
in your body.
You are in love.
Not in another relationship.
No, you're not looking for it.
You're
not looking for it. You would be in lack. When you're in love, there's nothing to do. You're in love. You're the magnet. You are it. And so
you are love.
Yeah. So the events that come into your life would not only be just a reflection of a relationship with someone that you wanted to be intimate with. You would have meaningful, loving relationships that would enhance that feeling. And when it didn't, you would say, "Ooh, you know what? I don't know. I don't know if this is right for me." You would trust that because you worked really hard to nurture this, to protect it, to grow it, to trust it again, to open up, right? It takes a lot to do this. But we see men in our work. I was on them this week. I never let up on those guys. Big, macho guys. You want to know what courage is? Let's go. Let's open that heart. And when they start cracking open, I mean, we see people heal from colon cancer and from angina and all, just boom, there it is, there it's not. That's what's been stored all down here. Once they open this up and it moves, the body is transforming in that moment. It's the system is informing itself. Information is being restored back into the body. So when you get to that point where when you're in lack and separation, time gets really crazy because you want stuff to happen faster and it feels like it's taking forever. That's because you're in separation. When you're in love and you're in connected, you don't want the moment to end. I mean, I had three guys over for dinner last night, all these academics. I cooked a meal and a half for these guys, took out great wine. Why? I wanted them to be so caught up in the moment that they forgot. We made a new memory. We had a great experience. And life then is about experiencing it in love. Like, I'm not going to be guilty of what I'm eating or judge what I'm eating if I've cooked a great meal. Let's eat. Because the guilt is worse than whatever it is you think is bad for you. So then, when you're feeling those elevated emotions, and you're locked in love, then you see life through the lens of love, and there's compassion. Like, you could look at your greatest adversary, the person that threw you under the bus, and you've overcome yourself and you've done the work.
They've stolen from you, they've tried to talk bad about you behind your back.
Trashing on you, all that stuff. You'll look at them and you'll see a part of yourself that you used to be that you no longer are, and you have nothing but understanding and compassion for them. Like, wow, I feel for that person. They're hurting. They're struggling. I used to be like that, but you're no longer that. When you're that, then they push your buttons. When you're not,
You're reactive to that.
because you're equal, but when you've overcome it, why would you do that? You would see them as somebody struggling, just like you see a child who's throwing a tantrum, just like, oh, they're going to get
Now here, I mean, I've got so many questions around this, but one thing quickly, how often do you find yourself in reaction mode when someone throws you under the bus, whether it's someone honking at you in a car and you say, how often do you get back to that place? And like, because aren't we conditioned to kind of react and
Dude,
respond?
I react every day.
So
I
you
react,
do?
oh my God. I react every day, but the fundamental question is, how long are you
Right,
going to react?
right.
So shortening the refractory period of your emotional reactions is that kind of intelligence where we're keeping ourselves out of the past. Justified, valid or not, the only person that's affecting is you. And then you have to ask yourself, is it loving to me? Well, if you can't control that emotional reaction, then you're a junkie. And you're on a bad trip, and you're overdosing. But if you know that you're overdosing, you got to get beyond your rational mind, because you'll say, why are you this way? Oh, because I should. All right? And by you doing that, is it making more of those chemicals? Yeah. Why were you doing that? To make you feel more like it's justified. So then, this takes, listen, I excuse myself many times in one day.
Because you'll be, I'm in reaction mode, let me step aside.
Are you, I'll be like, are you kidding me? What did they do? And then I'll be like, oh, we're not going to make a decision
in this state.
So give me a minute.
Oh, wow.
I go, take a few breaths, get out of that state, remember my future, where I'm going. It's so much more important than the present moment. I just got to condition my body into that future. And now it takes sometimes a Herculean effort, I have to tell you. You can ask my staff. I'll be in there 15, 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes I'll say it took me an hour. But
to get back to a peaceful state.
In the expanse of all eternity, if I don't overcome that emotion, then I'm in my past, and that's karma, because that emotion's going to drive my behaviors and thoughts, and I'm going to be predictable. My past is going to look, my future's going to look a lot like my past. So if I'm soulfully on the journey, then what matters the most is being able to learn the skill of self-regulation. So in our events, when we see people that can do brain and heart coherence, they know the formula. Well, I look at their brain scans and I'm like, Lewis, great brain. Hey, I see you can hold that heart coherence for 45 minutes. Great. Now let's put you on a pole at 55 feet in the air. Let's get a heart rate monitor on you and let's see what you're going to do up there. Do you want to be able to self-regulate there? Because if you can there, it's not like I'm trying to give you an adrenaline rush. Actually, I'm trying to do the opposite. I want you to settle your brain and body back down, go against thousands of years of programming like fear, and teach your body in that moment how to regulate. I guarantee you, if you go a little further than what you did and you stay conscious, instead of throwing in a program and rushing through it and trying to get it over with, you start breathing, you start getting back in your heart, you start getting centered, you work against those chemicals, I guarantee you when you walk into your life, the moment you see something doing, you're going to catch on right away. You're going to catch yourself. Now that saves you a lot of energy and a lot of time, because if you're able to change it then instead of 4 hours later, where you're just gone,
or you've already reacted.
Yeah, and you've done things you say I should have never done that. I should have never said that. That's what those emotions do, because those emotions make us really primitive. Really primitive. We're either going to become antagonistic and angry and aggressive. We're going to run and fear, or we're going to hide. Like, that's really the options.
People are still in a lot of pain and trauma and overwhelm, especially if you consume the media and the news. Please stop and minimize that, because I think it only creates more stress. When people say this is going to be the worst week of any week and it's going to be more deaths, like, what can people do in a simple, practical step when they just feel like, man, there's so much in my head right now. What can I do to start to slow down my heart rate just a little bit, to start thinking more calmly and make better decisions?
Yeah, I think that the moment we switch on that system for alert or for emergency, we alter ourselves in some way. And all of that response that we have to an environment that we perceive as threatening or dangerous pretty much causes us to move out of balance. And when you're out of balance, you're in survival. And when you're in survival, you want to rush to get things done. You can't be present. You know, you believe everything that equal to the feeling of fear or hostility, because information is relevant to you in that emotional state. So teaching people then that they have some type of control over that sympathetic response, that emergency system that switches on, is preparing you for something you can't predict.
Yeah.
Something that's an unknown, something that you can't control. And that survival system causes us to move more into our animal nature. And we're tapping our body's vital resources for health and regeneration. So short term, it's great, but you keep doing it over and over again, you start becoming more and more conditioned to that rush of energy. So teaching people how to self-regulate, teaching them how to move back into the present moment, teaching them that they can shorten their responses. It's really not that you react. I mean, we all react. The question is, how long are you going to react for? Because if you keep that reaction going, then you can't perceive any change in your environment. You won't have any ability to heal. So you become more affected by your environment. So simple process of getting back into the present moment, self-regulating, trading that fear for some other emotions.
Yeah.
And that's doing the work and
right.
The practice. And that's what we should be doing, because now we have energy to heal. We have energy for growth and repair. We have energy to create now. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not losing energy now. We're gaining energy. And
Yeah.
that signals the immune system, as we talked about. And that's what causes T cells to make antibodies and antigen, the immunoglobulins that fight antigens. And now your internal defense system can take care of the micro world,
Yes.
where there are invaders, where there are attackers, and you have energy to heal. And your immune system, as we said, is always combating viruses and bacteria. And if you're less responsive to your environment emotionally, then you're less responsive to your environment physically, and you have, more energy. And people just need to know the information, because that empowers them to begin to make different choices. And now that you know, you can apply knowledge and make a different choice, demonstrate a different behavior, create a new experience, and that new experience creates a new emotion. Wow, then all of a sudden now you start learning new things, and you start stepping away from your old self. And that's what you want people to do. Biology changes.
And creating a new self, stepping away from the old self. We talked about that in our interview. If people want to check out more on that, you for those that are just joining us, I'm seeing a lot of people joining and sharing where they're chiming in from. Good to see you all. I saw my friend Darman, a lot of people from all over the world watching this. I want to ask you a couple quick questions. One, before I ask the next question, if you guys click the little airplane button below when you share this on your Instagram story, or if you take a screenshot at any time and you tag me and at Dr. Joe, if you tag us, I'm going to be giving away a couple of copies of my book, a couple of copies of Joe's book to a few winners. I wanted to ask you a personal question, not too personal, but something personal that I don't think we talk about a lot, at least not in interviews that I've seen or that I've done with you. When do you feel the most stressed and overwhelmed? Or are you just like so elevated at this point because you do your work and the meditations daily that nothing affects you? But is there any moments where you're like, you feel trigger, you feel reaction? Because I think people see you as this incredible leader who's been doing this for decades, and you know, you live the practice, but there's got to be moments you react, right?
Of course. I mean, I react when I see certain people in the world misunderstand this information, or have an interest in trying to attack it in some way,
or take you down, or come out,
or misrepresent, or better yet, misrepresent it. I think I react to that. I mean, of course, I think a good day is, even if you do react, that you make your way back into your heart. If you finish there and you learn your lessons, I think it's a good day. So, I mean, I still get triggered, of course, but you know, I do my best every day to catch myself And I'm less effective in that state, and I think I've learned through trial and error to self-regulate and get back. It always feels like a better day when I do.
It's hard to make good choices when you come from reaction, fear, anxiety, stress, but you always create more powerful service in the world, from my experience, when your heart is filled with love, peace, and those type of qualities, which you teach about and talk about in your meditations, which I know. If you guys have gone through Dr. Joe's meditations, leave a heart, just comment with a heart to let us know if you have. And his meditations are unbelievable. I want to ask you the next question. When you get to that state of, Dr. Joe, your stuff is horrible, you suck, this is wrong, there's no proof, your science is wrong, whatever people say, how do you get back to your heart, and how long does that usually take for you?
Well, I'm going to answer that on two levels, because I just realized that used to bother me, much more than it does right now, because I actually don't care any longer. That as an example, because we have so much evidence that actually shows that it does work. So
but let's just say you get frustrated every now and then. How do you? Is there like 60-second practice? You're like, okay, I'm aware. Right. Now let me get back to my heart. What is that practice for you personally?
Yeah. So when I do react, though, part two of my answer was that I really want. I always take a moment and I step back. I have to disengage from whoever I'm talking to. I have to step away from whatever I'm doing, break my routine, and step away long enough to just remember that I'm disconnecting from the energy that I'm using to create a new future. And I'm back into a familiar energy that's connected to my past. And I've lost my ability to stay connected to it because a circumstance has altered my feelings and my thoughts. So I remember that. That's not a conversation you normally want to have with yourself when you think somebody's doing something to you, right? But I know the alternative just leads to a day that spirals downward. So then I close my eyes, or I step away for a minute, and I just put my attention back in my heart. And the first thing I work on is changing the way I breathe, to become conscious, moving the body out of danger, out of threat, teaching it how it can be safe again, to self-regulate, to slow it down into the present moment and start breathing. And when you slow your breath down, you slow your brain waves down. And when you slow your brain waves down, you're slowing down the system of arousal. And your heart actually influences that. So then once I feel my connection to my heart, then I start thinking about the emotions that I'm using to create that future, whether it's gratitude, whether it's freedom, whether it's awe or the mystical moment or whatever. And I just bring up that energy back into my heart, and I tune in to that energy that I've become familiar with because I do it enough times. And I remember I'm connecting to the energy of my future again. And I can do it sometimes in literally a minute or two.
Yeah.
Sometimes
takes an hour.
It takes me an hour, but I'm going to do my best to get there. And that's the
Yeah. Someone, Allison just posted that she went to your retreat in Sedona earlier this year and said it was life-changing. Someone else said we do your meditations every day. Again, if you're just joining in the last few minutes, Dr. Joe Dispenza in the house. A lot of people say they've seen you a few times in person. They love you in Arizona. Make sure to share the little button below. It's a little airplane. If you click on that, you can share it on your story. If you take a screenshot of this and tag me and Joe, I'm going to send out a couple copies of my book and a couple copies of Joe's book to a couple of people that we choose from that later. You've got some amazing resources on your site, drjoedispenza.com. The next question I have for you is, what is the biggest transformation you've seen someone in your work over the last few decades? You've seen incredible healings within a few days of people on stage you talked about in our interview. You've, probably don't even share a lot of these stories, but what's the one that stands out the most of a massive healing or just transformation from their past self that was hurting them into a new future self that you talk about so much?
God, Lewis, there are so many. if you asked me that question like maybe a year or two ago, I probably could have picked from a handful. But, you know, this last year, we have seen so many incredible outcomes, from blind people seeing to deaf people hearing to numerous people with stage 4 cancers going to remission, tumors disappearing on the spinal cord, on the breast and lungs and the brain. We have seen serious conditions, tumors in children disappear. I mean, it's been a crazy time. But I can tell you a quick story about a woman who is a nurse in London, and she had a stroke, and it was right under the optic nerve, and it caused blindness in the left lower quadrant in both eyes, like from like 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. She was clinically blind as a result of the stroke, and she lost her driver's license. She couldn't function as a nurse anymore. She couldn't type. Compromised because she was diagnosed as legally blind. So her life changed dramatically, and so she went to all the doctors, and the prognosis is pretty straightforward. If you don't see many changes after 2 weeks, you're probably not going to see many changes after that point. And so a year went by. She was asking all her colleagues. I mean, I think if you want a good doctor, ask a nurse. Nurses know good doctors. And so she went to all the good doctors that she knew. Get used to it. It's probably going to degenerate over as you age. And one of the doctors said, hey, why don't you go to this Dispenza event? I'll go with you. So they came. So they did the course, the preliminary course, and they came prepared. And it didn't even occur to her that she wanted to heal her vision. She was more interested in just learning how to cope in her life, and she wanted to start a nonprofit, but she was curious.
Learning how to cope with the vision.
The blindness.
Yeah.
That's what she thought, that she would be a better person. So halfway through the event, it occurs to her, maybe I could heal this thing.
Wow.
And she's in a walking meditation, and she gets lit up and inspired. She goes into the next meditation in the late morning. She finishes the meditation, she lays down, and she has this crackling sound in her brain, and with this kind of temperature change. When she opens her eyes, she has complete recovery
Wow.
Of her blindness. We have the medical scans to show that the before scan of her eyes is all black between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock. The Monday after the event, on the Monday morning, there's not one black spot on the post-scan in either eye. So she had complete recovery, a complete change in
wow. And she can still see fine today?
We just saw her in Munich in February. She was one of the volunteers and still doing very well.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Curing blindness, that's another level, man. That's inspiring. I'm reading some of the comments come through here of people who are saying they can't wait till they can get tickets to your next event when they're allowed to get out of this quarantine. Really quick before I ask the next question, if you guys can all type in the thing you're most grateful for today. For me, I talk a lot about gratitude. Dr. Joe, I know for you, gratitude is something that's important to get to that field of energy, of positivity, of love, where you can think clearer. And when we have the right perspective, we can make better decisions. So go ahead and type in what you're most grateful for in the chat box. We'd love to see some of that. And leave a question that you have for Dr. Joe, and I'll try to skim through and see what we have here. Also, if you're just joining, thanks to everyone who shared this. Click the little airplane button below on the bottom to share this over on your stories to your friends. This will be up for 24 hours so people can watch this later. Seeing a lot of people saying just grateful to be alive, grateful for Dr. Joe, grateful for being healed from Dr. Joe in the past. What the bleep do we know? That was a movie you did, what was that, 10, 15 years ago or something, a documentary?
Yeah, probably a little over 12 years ago.
Wow, it's amazing. Grateful for the feeling of gratitude. Grateful for my son. I think the more we express those things, we get out of that fear state. What does gratitude do for us in replacing that kind of anxiety and fear?
Well, I mean, we've done research on gratitude, and it's very interesting because when you receive something, you've just received something. When something's happening to you or something just happened to you that's favorable, you feel this feeling of gratitude. So yes, the emotional signature its signature emotionally means something just happened to you or something is happening to you. So your body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between an experience in your life that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can fabricate by thought alone. To the body, it's so objective, it's exactly the same. So when people start to feel gratitude, their body is believing that something favorable is going to happen to them, that is happening to them, or has already happened to them.
Really?
So the emotional signature of gratitude is the perfect signature or the state of energy to receive. So when we begin to embrace our future and we feel gratitude for it, we will believe that future is more of a reality because it's equal to the emotion that we're experiencing. But we're feeling the emotion before the actual event occurs. So gratitude, in a sense, you could use it to elevate your energy. And when you do, just 10, 15 minutes a day, you'll strengthen your immune system by 50%. That's
wow. Just by having gratitude for 10, 15 minutes.
Yes, because your body starts to put energy right in your heart center. And there's a gland in there that we talked about in your show called that gland that has an endocrinological aspect and an immunological aspect. And it begins to signal chemicals that tells your T cells, strengthen. You got energy to like modify and create more receptors for anything coming out. And now your inner environment is doing that, and your T cells make these antibodies, these immunoglobulins that are the body's natural flu shot. It's proteins that protect cells, especially immune cells. And now you have an internal army, an internal order that will be greater than the environment. And now you have strength, you know, and you, from a suggestibility standpoint, you only accept, believe, and surrender to thoughts equal to your emotional state. So if people are in fear, then the information that comes in equal to fear, they will begin to resonate with or relate with because it's equal to that emotion. So they'll accept the information, they'll believe the information, they'll surrender to the information without ever analyzing it. And that programs us into certain limited behaviors. So then when you feel gratitude, the thoughts that you think, the dreams that you create, the behaviors that you demonstrate.
Preach it.
You begin to feel the future. Now something else happens. You start creating a huge change in the information, and you program your autonomic nervous system to program your body to become that future. And people are doing it.
Amazing, man. I've got 3 questions for you that I'm seeing come through that I want to make sure we ask. I want to keep this probably in the next 10 minutes. We'll wrap things up because I want to make sure you got to go create more meditations, content. You got so much going on. If you guys are watching this and enjoying this right now, leave a heart, click the little airplane button below. You can share this on your story and tag me and Dr. Joe. Before I ask these 3 questions, which I think are going to be mind-blowing for people to hear these responses, you just launched some new supplements as well to help people with optimizing their body, their mind. Can you talk about that for a second, just so people are aware of this?
Sure. I mean, I didn't predict any of this global situation to happen, but I have been working with creating a healthy blend of raw materials that have to do with vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and plant-based herbs and formulations to provide the very building blocks of the hormonal centers in our bodies that we bless on a daily basis to create more order and coherence in each one of those individual little brains. And the coherence begins to create more orders or more clear orders to hormonal centers. And so by people doing the blessings and creating this balance, I thought, God, if I provided the raw materials and we had the amino acids that were in the highest concentration in each hormonal center, we can begin to influence or provide the raw materials for people to move back in the balance. So we created this one for the heart center. And because the heart is, has all these functions, we put a lot of the immunoglobulins that are the natural boosters for our immune system to create more inner balance. And then, we do a lot of work with the pineal gland in in our community, that radio receiver that connects you to the mystical. So I created the raw materials to create more balance when we go to sleep, if you want to dream and go into restorative sleep, and then maybe something that may empower your pineal gland to get you up and get you going and create the proper amounts of serotonin and some of those excitatory neurotransmitters that keep people awake and focused. So we've got 3. The company's called Biosyntropy, and we have 3 in formulation. So
yeah,
soon.
I'm seeing someone commented they already have the supplements, so they got them for me already. So where can they go to get that? Is that just at drjoedispenza.com? There's a link where they can get the supplements and order those?
No, the company is called Biosyntropy. Biosyntropy,
Okay.
BIOSYNTROPY.com, and the products are there. Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. I think there's a link somewhere on your website too that I saw. That
there could be, yeah.
So if you go to this link here, here's a question. Here's a question that I saw, and I'm seeing people saying they've already got your supplements and they want to get it. So that's going to be awesome for people if they go there. This is a question that I think everyone wants to know the answer to, especially during this time of feeling like there's a lack, feeling like there's a loss, feeling like there's uncertainty around money, around opportunities. Opportunities are dwindling for some people that they're thinking, all these uncertain times. How do we change from having a scarcity mindset into an abundance mindset, especially if the evidence is not showing that we have abundance right now for some people?
Sure. Well, look, this is a tough question to answer, but I'll tell you that for me, I'm going to see this as a great opportunity, brilliantly disguised as an impossible situation, that I'm not going to meet this challenge from the same level of consciousness. We have to go to a greater level of awareness, a greater level of consciousness, and create and invent and figure out new ways to connect and figure out new ways to influence the Earth's field and create new ways to change outcomes in reality. And it's not about one person doing it. It's a new consciousness that must emerge that isn't going to live in fear. Because what we fear, we give power to, we give our attention to. That we don't live as victims to our circumstances, that we create different circumstances. That if you face this present challenge as an opportunity for a greater consciousness to emerge, a collective consciousness that sees behind the illusion of separation, that could connect in a field of information and create one mind, create one heart, and emerge like those birds that all fly in one pattern, and fish in one school. You get the appearance that it's a bigger organism because there's no leader in that flock. There's no leader in that school. Everybody's leading. Everybody is demonstrating it. And that's, we have to step up beyond it. And information is causing us to see that maybe governments aren't going to take care of us. Maybe churches are not going to take care of us, or synagogues, or maybe, medicine is not going to take care of us. And maybe all of those things that we've relied on to change our inner state is not going to really, we're not going to really take care of us. At a certain point, we got to take care of us, right?
Dang.
And
preach it, Dr. Joe, preach it.
No, we got to face this. There's no other alternative.
Yeah.
There isn't another alternative except waiting instead of creating. So maybe it's a time in history that you and I negotiated to be here on some other space and time, and that we're here for an awakening. Let's see what happens if we play that out. And you can't be afraid, and you can't be angry, and you can't be hostile, and you can't be resentful. And that's this consciousness that creates viruses, that creates disease. It's going to be a different frequency. We're going to see it from a different level of mind.
The creative moment is when you get beyond yourself, when you dissociate from everything known in your material world. Turns out when you do that and you start changing your brainwaves slow down into alpha and theta, you're suppressing the memory bank of the known self that keeps you plugged into three-dimensional reality. When you quiet down this mechanism, now all of a sudden you start connecting to that field. And when you can stay conscious in those subconscious realms, when you can literally regulate and change brainwaves, now you're in the operating system where you can make those significant changes. So we now know that when people apply the formula, and they do that properly, now they're walking through that door where they're ready to create from it. In other words, you can't create from the known. You can't create with your body. That's matter trying to change matter. And you can do it, it's just going to take a long time.
Right.
But when you create from the field instead of from matter, there's a whole different set of dynamics that takes place. And why not push that envelope to see, okay, if we've done this, is it possible to do this? As an example, we do these wonderful healing circles where you see these dramatic, instantaneous changes. So the person who's healed themselves of some health condition, when it comes time to heal somebody else, they're going to say, well, now I understand the science, I understand how this all works, I know how to get beyond myself, I know how to open my heart. They start piecing it all together. Let's take the formula to the next level. Now they witness a significant change in a person's body in real time, right there. So then the next question is, okay, like this happened many times. As an example, the woman who was at the event in Mallorca, Spain, her brother had a massive stroke in Colombia, and she went back to Colombia, and he was in a coma for 2 weeks. She called up the healing circle and said, hey, can we do a healing on my brother? Now, if you're playing by the rules of Newtonian physics, three-dimensional reality, you're going to say, well, you need to be in front of the guy in order to heal him. But if you understand there's no separation in the quantum, that everything's connected when you're in that place, so wouldn't that be the next application of the formula? So they go over the science, they get it. Okay, we just need a picture of him, and that's our coordinate. And if we're in the field,
sending a frequency to that coordinate.
Yeah, but you're not sending it anywhere because there's nowhere to send. There's no space and time there. You're connecting to it, exactly. That's a great way to say it. In 1 hour after that coherence healing, he comes back to consciousness.
Wow.
Now, that's the extension of where we're going. You see, now we're progressing. A woman who was in one coherence healing group was a pediatric nurse in Children's Hospital in Seattle, and again witnessed an amazing miracle after our event in Toronto. She comes back, and there's a little, they call them friends, there's a little guy failing. Doctors hit him with the paddles, they use all the drugs to bring him back, and they walk out of the room, and they say, we lost him. She walks over, puts her hands right in the field, and this kid comes right back online. Wow. Doctors are like, what was that? And now, so we have a lot of our interest now is, I want to get 50%. 1 out of 2 people, we're collecting the data in this coherence healings. When we're 50%, we're going to walk into a children's hospital, and we have 3 children's hospitals right now that are interested in us. We'll show them the data, we'll show them the results, we'll say we don't want any money, we'll never even touch the kids, all we want to do is just change their lives. And when we're 50%, we're going to start doing it in children's hospitals, and we're gathering the data right now.
That's pretty cool. For people that are mission-driven, how much more challenging is it to have a thriving relationship when you put your life into a mission?
No, here's the deal. I will never work in a relationship. I just won't. If I'm working in a relationship, something's wrong. I'll work on me, and I'll bring my best. You bring your best, and we get together, and we celebrate.
And it should work.
It should work. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to step back and see, what is it about me? Not you, what is it about me that I need to really look at and change? Now, if there's a vibrational match, and it flows, and it's fun, and you connect on physically, mentally, mind, body, soul, that's cool. I think that's healthy. But a mission-driven person can't be in a relationship where you have to keep going back and trying to fix something. I just won't do that. I just think that when it's right, and I'll know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that relationships can be easy, and I do think and I think that they should be, and I think that if you're heart-centered, that's a different place you meet. Yeah. Than other emotions, and again, every time I have a mystical moment, and I feel that transcendental love that I don't even know the word for, every time I have one of those moments, I think I got this all wrong. It's just that it is not chemical; it's electric. And
you got what all wrong?
Well, the way we view the world, the way we don't see things how they are, we see things how we are, and every inner experience that's transcendental experience enriches circuitry in your brain. experience produces emotion or energy in the body. So you start having transcendental moments where you start connecting to that field. Its signature is love. I mean, but not love like a love for your puppy. This is like an arousal. This is, I don't know the other word, but bliss.
Spiritual arousal.
Yeah, and we have the evidence. We can say, oh, watch this person's brain. And scientists are studying our work. I'll say, oh, watch, she's going to pop in a few minutes. What do you mean? Just watch, she's going to pop. And all of a sudden, this person goes into an arousal. The sympathetic nervous system is so switched on, but the arousal isn't like an arousal that from the environment that produces anger or aggression or fear, or anxiety or pain or suffering. That's survival in the environment that produces the arousal. This arousal is coming from energy in the body that's moving up into the brain, and the arousal is bliss. The arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is
freedom, peace.
Oof, yeah. But it's not chemical. It's you'll feel it in every single cell in your body. Now here's the outcome of that. The outcome of that is that when you open your eyes and some conditioning, some layer has been removed, your spectrum of the way the world looks broadens now, because now you're wired to perceive what's always existed, but you didn't have the circuits in place to perceive them. So then it's the inner experience that literally transforms our experience of the outer world. And so when you start having moments where you hit that kind of frequency, or you have those moments of love, you're less dependent on anyone to bring you happiness. Yeah. You're okay. You can love the person for their flaws, because you can see a part of yourself you used to be that you no longer are. And instead of judgment, you have compassion. And you can encourage and communicate from a level of connection instead of intimidation or competition, or however relationships work. So I do think that it's energy and vibration, and I think that in our community, at least, people who have relationships that are built from our community tend to be more long-lasting, because they're more self-aware. Yeah. And so there's no blame, there's no excuses, there's no make wrong, there's no competition, there's none of that. There's just, this is who I am, you know? And I think that the ultimate goal is when you reach the point in your life when how you appear to the world is who you really are. That level of transparency it takes no effort. Right. You can be yourself, and you know, people say to me, wow, you're pretty approachable. And I say, well, God, I work so hard every day on overcoming myself in the morning, overcoming my ego. Yeah. Why would I want to build it up the next day? Because I got to face that guy again tomorrow morning. So why not just keep, you know, taking those edges and smoothing them down, so that you're less unconscious to all of those programs that are built in relationship.
Before we continue this video, make sure to subscribe below and turn on the notification bell right now so you don't miss out on these great videos every single day.
Is it possible that we can build our immune system so strong and our body so strong that we would reject viruses?
Your body rejects viruses all the time. Of course. It has memorized certain viruses that you've been exposed to. It has memorized certain bacteria that you've been exposed to, and it's beaten those viruses. Not every virus wins in the body. The body has an intelligence, and it has quite a library of memories in the white blood cells. So your body is fighting viruses and bacteria all the time. There's a constant competition going on.
Really?
So our research shows that 4 days of opening your heart releases immunoglobulin A, your body's primary defense against bacteria and viruses. It's better than the flu shot. It's the body's natural flu shot. And that's the innate intelligence of the body saying, I got this. I got a lot of energy. In fact, I got a surplus of energy. In fact, I'm radiating energy, and now
too much
in my
energy.
Outer world. Well, now my outer world is not controlling my inner world. My inner world now is functioning independent of what's going on in my outer world. And now,
you're manifesting. You're manifesting.
Now you got it. Now you're in a creative state.
People are coming to you. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Now you're a magnet. Now you have a field, right? And you have energy to heal. And our research shows that that field around your body will actually expand. You radiate more light and information. Cells are getting new information that are causing light to be exchanged between cells and information. Now the body's getting an upgrade. So that immunoglobulin A in 4 days went up 50%. So now we know that if it's going up 50%, that then the immune system was getting a new signal. And nitric oxide then causes another chemical to activate the arteries in your heart to swell. And now, just like when energy moves into your sexual organs and it swells with blood and you have energy there, the same intensity, it moves into your heart. And now the heart is activated. And what do you feel? You feel an incredible amount of love. Yeah, and love. You feel whole. And now the more whole you feel, our research shows, then the less separate you feel from the things you want in your life, because you feel like you already have them. You only want things when you're in lack, but when you feel whole, then it feels like it's already happened. And that tends to be the exact emotion that causes those synchronicities and serendipities and coincidences to happen in our life. And you say to a person, what are you doing? And they're saying, I'm not doing anything. I'm just so
loving
happy.
life. I'm being myself. Exactly.
I'm free. I'm free from the past. I'm free from my story of the past. In fact, I'm more connected to the energy of my future than I am to the energy of my past. I'm believing in my future more than I'm believing in my past. In fact, I'm more in love with my future than I am with my past. And I want to keep telling the story of the future.
I'm more in love with my future than the story of my past. But most of us tell the story of our past in a negative sense on how it's held us back. Millions of times over our life, as opposed to the story of the future, of what we want to create or who we want to become.
Yeah. Listen, again, you tell that story, and the latest research on memory says that memory is creative, that in fact, 50% of that story you embellish. People make up that story. Let me tell you why they make up that story. Because they excuse themselves for the fact that they haven't been able to change since that event. They'll have to make it sound worse than it really was.
To make it harder to grow and change.
So that they can reaffirm their limited sense of their inability to change. So then that story becomes more and more of a story, and it's less of the truth, because you got to work yourself up into a state. There were lions and tigers, and there was, there were helicopters.
Snowstorms. And
everybody was firing bullets. It was worse than you could possibly imagine. And then you got to feel that emotion, right? And then you're looking, oh yeah, it must have been really bad. Now that's your identity now. That's your identity.
And so the more you hold on to that identity of the past, the harder it is to become who you want to be in the future.
Well, here's to answer the other part of your question when we started talking. How do you get that person out of their past?
Yeah.
Well, we need a week. It's not going to happen.
You mean it doesn't happen overnight?
No, I want them to come right up against their fear. I want them to come right up against their doubt. I want them to come up against the point where they're going to give up and quit. And they're going to sit there and nobody else is giving up and quitting. And they're going to go all in more, and they're going to start believing there's something on the other side of that emotion. They're going to believe that there's something past the story of their past, because they're stretching themselves out of the known. And it takes a tremendous amount of awareness, repetition, information, model building, sharing, understanding, experiencing, to finally have a person get to the point where they just let go. And when they do, the body's liberated from the past, and there's a release of energy. And we now know that there's a formula to teach people how to do that. In fact, we're getting so good at it that the first 2 days, day and a half, sometimes 1 day in certain groups of a week-long event is about retiring that past, finishing it. This is when the story ends. This is when they get over it. Now, the next 5 days, the person's ready to create a new future. And they're not going to have a problem teaching their body what it feels like to be in love with life, to feel like all their needs are met, that they're free. They are going to fall in love with it, and they are going to begin to signal new genes. They're going to begin to change their brain circuitry, their brain chemistry, their immune system, their gene expression, the telomeres. It's all going to happen. They're more of that future self, and they're headed to a future. Now, here's the deal, though. you got to be able to sustain that state when you return back to your life. That's the name of the game. You got to be able to, you got to bring the game into your life now, and no person, no circumstance, no condition in your life would cause you to feel the old way again. Because the moment you started feeling victimized, the moment you started feeling angry, you just returned to the old self. You disconnected from the energy of your future and you're back to the energy of your past. Don't expect anything to change in your life. And if you'd say to me, well, it was because of that person, I'd say, you're back to the unconscious program of believing that your outer world is controlling your inner world. Now, the moment the person starts creating effects in their life and they start having those synchronicities and serendipities, now all of a sudden, they're going to realize what they're doing inside of them is producing an effect outside of them. And they're going to say, oh my God, I'm more of the creator of my life and the less of the victim I am of my life. And I wouldn't create getting that health condition because I'm creating everything in my life. And now they're not victims. And so it's not something you get in one bite. You know, it's something you got to stay with.
Of course. So what are a few things we can do before we come to your events? What are a few things we can do to support our inner environment on a daily basis?
Well, listen, the first thing and the most important thing for me is knowledge and information. Knowledge is really power, and knowledge and information about yourself should empower you. It should empower the self, right? So when we learn about the immune system and all it can do, and we say, oh my God, you mean not every virus gets to me? In fact, no. And the more you understand that, and the more you coax your immune system into love and into love. Like I just did this little thing on our social media where I was talking about the inner army of order and what would be the signal you would want that inner army to get. And so we created this meditation and we said, what would invincibility feel like? Signal your body and feel invincible. How would you feel if you had an uncompromising will, that you had more energy than you could possibly imagine? Show your body what it feels like, because it is that emotion of invincibility, that emotion of an uncompromising will to empower your inner world. And you have the intent of that's what it's for. Wow, get ready, because you're going to start creating a cadence and a rhythm where your body's going, whoa, what is all these new chemicals? What are all these new signals?
Right.
Hey, it's time. Hey, now all of a sudden receptor sites on the T cells go, wow, we got some new signals coming from the boss here. Let's open up all those T cell receptors. Let's go. In fact, we would love a little fight right now because we got a lot of time on our hands and we got all our receptors turned on. That would be a signal for your body. We also know that if you could just trade fear and frustration and resentment and suffering for an elevated emotion and truly open your heart again and practice doing that, you'll heal.
You'll heal.
You'll heal, because, I mean, all healings happen in the heart. And we've seen some really incredible moments in the last year where people that were traumatized from childhood, that were abused sexually, physically, emotionally, that were suicidal, that had all kinds of health conditions, they came to the edge of that emotion that kept them connected to the past. And they were ready to give up in one meditation because they never had felt an emotion like this that they could remember, that it was so intense. And they thought about all the times for the last year that they never missed a day of doing a meditation, even when they didn't feel like it, or when they wanted to quit halfway through and they didn't, they went all the way. They thought about all those times that they went to that point and they went one more time.
Really?
And their words are always the same. And my heart blew wide open. And I look back at my entire past, and I don't want to change one thing in my past because it brought me to this present moment. And I can see my betrayers. I could see the people in my life that had a hand in this. And I have nothing but compassion for them, because now the person is no longer viewing that past from the same level of consciousness. They're viewing it from a place of love, of wholeness. And they see the greater good of all of it. And now their conditions, their health conditions, their endometriosis, their uterine tumors, I mean, whatever it is, literally disappears, and they have an incredible, incredible change in their brain chemistry. They're in love with life. They're off their meds. They're not suicidal. Why would they be? They're free. So it can happen in an instant when the heart is healed. And everybody gets the new signal. The body's out of the past. The body's no longer feeling the emotions of the past. And sometimes we got to come right up against that edge. That's the great moment.
It's probably not sometimes, it's probably every time. In order to break through is to get up against that edge.
Yeah.
So how do we, I mean, I feel like we've brainwashed ourselves over the years to believe a story of the past is who we are and who we will always be in the future. So how do we brainwash ourselves in times of stress and anxiety in order to become more peaceful, loving, and successful in the future? How do we brainwash ourselves in a different way?
Sure. Well, that's what I have spent just about my whole life. Wow, I mean, the first and most important thing is that you have to understand that if 95% of who you are is a set of unconscious programs, then the first step is lighting a match in a dark place. If you want to become someone else, you got to become aware of who you are.
Yes.
That means you got to start thinking about what you've been thinking about. You got to start paying attention to how you speak. You got to be conscious.
Being conscious to every thought, action,
emotion,
word, emotion, feeling, expression, body language, everything you need to be aware of and conscious of.
Self-aware.
Is there a way that you help people to track this besides just like, okay, I'm aware of this in the moment? Do they journal their thoughts throughout the day, or when a negative thought comes up, do they remember the way their body language is throughout the day, closed off and guarded or open? How do they self-reflect where they can track it better?
Well, that's a big question. But I will tell you this, that you demystify the word meditation, and the word meditation literally means become familiar with.
Yeah.
And when you become so familiar with your thoughts, so aware of your emotions, so conscious of your habits that you wouldn't go unconscious to them again, now you're no longer the program, right?
Mm-hmm.
So getting people disentangled from that program, we found out is a formula. And when we teach people how to do certain things with their focus and opening their awareness, when we teach them how to create a very disorderly brain that has been driven by the hormones of stress into a more orderly, coherent brain, and teach them how to open their focus and practice that, they'll come up against those thoughts and they'll become so familiar with them. Listen to this. They won't believe them anymore when they come up any longer.
Wow.
And so when they hear them in their day, they'll be like, that's not going to stop me from my future. So if they're sitting there and they want to quit, just because they're sitting still and they're not quitting, then they're developing a will that's greater than those programs. And you're breaking out of the shell. And you keep doing that, you're going to get up and do the work every day because you did it yesterday. And you're going to want to do more of that because you're getting out of your past and it feels better. And if you keep doing that and you keep feeling better every day, the question is, why wouldn't you do it every day? Because you would ultimately just feel better. And then the more whole you feel means the more you are connected to your future. Imagine if you felt every single day, and this is what I do, work on. If I could stay connected to the emotions of my future all day long, there's no way I would be looking for when it would be happening. How could I look for when it would be happening if I feel like it's happening? I wouldn't look anymore, which means I wouldn't be separate from it. And that's when you start creating the magic, right? That's when you're in that zone. And that's when that reaffirms that personality that you're becoming. And now you don't, wake up in the morning and go, oh God, I got to create my future. No, you're going to jump out of bed because
excited.
You're not going to want that magic to end. That's the key. So you teach people how to do this and they start seeing the events in their life. They're not going to want to miss a day in really just getting beyond their personality. And listen, it's so cool because it's amazing. You see all these people come in for success and new careers and new relationships and healing from a disease and mystical experience. They come in for all these different kind of reasons, healing from a childhood trauma. But really, they just want wholeness.
Right.
And so as they start becoming more whole and they start feeling more whole, it's not coming from anywhere out there. It's not coming from out there. Nothing out there is making them feel whole. When the novelty of the thing wears off, you feel empty again. They're feeling whole from within. Oh, this is different. This is a different game. So why wouldn't you want to keep feeling more whole that you no longer want anything? Now, Now you're not living in separation any longer. That's the cool part.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to learn how to unlock the power of your mind even more, then click the link right here to download our free PDF with Dr. Joe Dispenza for more wisdom. Make sure to subscribe to this video as well for more greatness in your life.